Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is 9 a.m. Wednesday, August 23rd. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me.
Just to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So at this time is citizen input, and this is that classic situation that puts us in a spot where we do have an agenda item talking about our partnership with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we have three people asking to speak on mule deer. So at this time is the chair's prerogative. I'm not going to allow this topic, knowing that this is not a public hearing on the matter. I know we've heard a lot of input and it's a very engaging topic. So with that, I do apologize. That's a little bit of procedure.
I'd like to make a counter argument. We have been told for several weeks that the topic that's going to be on our agenda is the state mule deer plan, which is a very different topic than, for example, the county mule deer winter range wildlife overlay update, which we abandoned several weeks ago. So if there is anyone who would like to speak on that topic, I think they should be allowed to speak on that topic because it is not what is on the agenda.
Okay, so as I say, it's not a public hearing on the matter. Commissioner Dare, any thoughts?
When we have the presentation, is there any comments? There won't be none with that. Okay, all right. So, and I didn't see what did they say?
Oh, I just wanted to speak on it just says mule deer.
Mule deer. So does it say overlay mule deer or does it just say?
County land use and mule deer, one of them.
Okay, well then maybe that one could speak if it's.
Okay, well, so there's support for this. As I say, I just so you know, I mean, this is the dynamics of this situation where we're not having a public hearing on the matter. So with this input, let's allow this testimony. Please join us. This is 3-minute public testimony, citizen input on the topics that you'd like to speak. So we are going to proceed with this. So Carl Shoemaker will be first, Carl Fundling is second, and then Michael Valeri.
Thank you for letting me speak. Carl Shoemaker, I live in Bend. Mule deer, beautiful animals. I see them sometimes on Clay Street as they're migrating, usually up to the mountains to forage. If they can make it across 3rd Street. They migrate in seasonal cycles. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that. And so they go up to forage and mate. And the hunters like to hunt them up there, of course. And then return when the snow starts falling to find food on the flatlands. They're very skittish animals. You can't get close to them and they don't like, especially if they're walking down the road. So if there's loud noises, cars or machinery, they just won't go through that property. So I wanted to propose a modest proposal. There are nature bridges. I've seen photographs, wide bridges made of concrete on the bottom and overlaid with dirt with plant foliage that attract animals such as mule deer to cross. And if even one were laid down, say, between Bend and Redmond, that would make it much easier and safer for the deer to cross. And they would eventually figure out, oh, it's safe to cross here. And that would be a future pathway for them. Perhaps even the herds would grow after that. And That's all I really wanted to talk about.
Great, thank you. So Carl Fundling.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Carl Findling. Commissioners DeBonne, Adair, and Chang. I'm here to speak about a process that was abandoned, the Goal 5 Mule Deer Overlay process. I'd like to ask that everyone review the information published on the county website, frequently asked questions, including commissioners. Within these FAQs are answers to the ongoing misinformation and lack of understanding. Growth will continue, it will not stop. Managing humans is imperative. Like many things we do in life, we ask professionals, in this case, ODF&W, biologists, to guide us in information to make decisions, not based on emotion, but science, to the best of their data sets. Science tells us many times the best practices. We might see it in the forest collaboratives. We might see it with sage grouse. And so for a visual, we have worksheets. Worksheets many times guide us. The science is for sage grouse. Well, what's best for the bird is best for the herd, we always hear. We hear about things that we should follow as a best practice. We have fact sheets on mule deer, plenty of them, from the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife biologists that gather all this data. And we have many of those fact sheets available to everyone here. I've spoken in the past. August 8th of 2019, I addressed the commission on community development and land use. I first went to say critical winter range just south the city limits is disappearing at an alarming rate. At that point, it was the large solar array just east of town next to a fire station I worked in for many years. And I watched the mule deer in there every winter for 2 or 3 months, living in critical winter range habitat. As I mentioned in that letter in 2019, just east of our city limits is a large solar farm with effectively a barrier to movement and removed hundreds of acres of winter range forage, only forcing more wildlife into our city limits. I could go on and on. You have that letter in the record. And again, in July 27, 2022, I also went through what I feel is important progress towards completion of the wildlife overlay in land use. Since I was with the Oregon Hunters Association as a land conservation director, winter range is crucial to wildlife survival, namely mule deer. 90% of the Deschutes County residents live within winter range. We must do something to support our mule deer. And again, I'm only here to give a little disapproval as to the process that was upended, I guess. So thanks for your time. I would love to see some real engagement with ODF&W today as they present some facts about mule deer. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And then Michael O'Grady. Or Casey.
Yes. Thank you, Chair DeBonne and Commissioners Chang and Adair. For the record, my name is Michael O'Casey, another good Scottish name, not O'Leary, but yeah, it's a good.
That O'Grady, but yeah, it was close.
And I just wanted to come in today and talk about the importance of mule deer as well and the county overlay process. You know, I was able to escape the smoke this last week and went back to Astoria where I grew up, and we got on the Columbia River and got out into some great salmon fishing and came home with a couple salmon and was able to smoke that. And why do I bring up salmon with mule deer? I think it's just that pleasure of coming home with food for the family. And mule deer do the same thing, and they're really important food source. You know, subsistence isn't really talked about as much outside of tribes in Oregon anymore. But there are some families that still continue to utilize subsistence for their food sources here in Central Oregon. And I try my best. You know, I still buy some good beef every once in a while and other chicken and other things. But just the importance of mule deer in our community is critical. And since the 1980s, we've gone from a high of around 300 and some thousand mule deer to down to today around 160,000. Deschutes County used to be what a lot of biologists call a mule deer factory. And we've declined over 50% in the last 20 years. And the commission has, in my opinion, a responsibility to manage the county's land use laws and land use planning in a way that is compatible with wildlife and with the growth of our community. And I was disappointed to see the work session a couple of months ago, or at the end of June, with the decision to abandon a process that had been multiple years in the making with robust public comment. And I was watching it on Zoom, unable to speak at the time. So I appreciate you allowing us to have a moment here to convey our opinions on the matter. But it was disappointing for me to see, hundreds of comments, years in the making, lots of time and resources from the county, an agreement to move forward in 2021. It's just been a long process, I would say, and to see it disappear in a way where we weren't able to be present for public comment was disappointing. And I think you still have a great opportunity. So I really appreciate you guys bringing in ODF&W today to talk about mule deer, because I think you're going to hear a lot about how habitat is really critical to their survival. And that includes responsible zoning to make sure that habitat maintains both on public and on private. And the 188,000 acres or so that was going to be expanded for some reasonable regulations, in my opinion, was a good next step. We've got so many different factors here. Same with salmon on the coast, right? You can't just say it's one thing, right? So we're not gonna have a silver bullet with land use planning, but it's one step in a process where wildlife crossings are another piece, and reducing collisions, reducing poaching. All of these factors are really critical. And this was one stool in the cog, or one cog in the wheel, or one stool on the bench, whatever it is. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So this is citizen input. Is there anyone requesting to speak? Is there anybody online? Thank you very much. At this time, consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Item number 8, public hearing on the proposed conveyance of property on Drafter Road to the Lapine, Drafter Road in Lapine for the Foundation for Affordable Housing. It's a public hearing on the matter.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Bollinger, Deschutes County Property Management. We also have online Tommy Waldron with Foundation for Affordable Housing. I think he's having some audio challenges, so he may be connecting audio via his phone. So would you like me to start kind of with a briefing?
Yeah, so this is a public hearing on the matter, but yeah, please just lay out what we're doing here and if there's any questions from the commissioners.
Sure. So we're here today for the board to consider a conveyance of 3.27 acres on Drafter Road to Foundation for Affordable Housing. So going back in time a bit, earlier this spring, Foundation for Affordable Housing submitted a proposal to the county to purchase 3.27 acres on Drafter Road. And that would provide for affordable housing somewhere in the proximity of 124 units with a mix of housing for seniors and those that qualify. This would be at 60% AMI or below, and that all is based on what sort of funding they can provide on the project. Let's see here. So their first phase would come online in about 1.5 years, I believe, and that would be for the senior community. And then phase 2 would come on 1 to 2 years after that.
Great, thank you very much. So this is 3 approximately 1 acre parcels in the city of Lapine on Drafter Road, received at the county through tax foreclosure process previously. One question is do the dollars get divided out for jurisdictions, the taxing districts?
So prior to a recent Supreme Court decision, the way that it works in the state of Oregon is after the county makes itself whole on the maintenance and supervision of tax foreclosed properties, any remaining proceeds would go back to the taxing districts. Now, due to a recent Supreme Court decision, based on a case out of Minnesota, Oregon is currently kind of revamping on how that will look. So we don't exactly know what the future holds on those proceeds, but the state is working on those change in rules.
So for Deschutes County property, we'll recover costs of holding that property over time, then there'll be X amount to be determined, it sounds like.
Seems that way. Kim may weigh in further.
There you go. That's correct. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this proposal. My questions were along this similar lines, and basically one thing I wanted to understand was whether the proceeds from these sales would take the same pathway as the proceeds from the auctioned tax foreclosed properties in that.
Historically, yes, but due to this upcoming change, there's uncertainty there.
So yeah, then acknowledging this, this could be on an annual auction. That'd be other way for disposal of these properties, but this is a request that has come to the county and this is the response. So with that, let's acknowledge this is a public hearing on the matter. So is there anyone here to testify on this proposed conveyance of property? Is there anyone online? So seeing none,
Would this be the appropriate time if Tommy Waldron wants to say anything about the project to
Absolutely.
offer comments?
thank you very much for that. So, yeah, Mr. Waldron, if you're available via audio or however you may be connected today, please join us. So, Mr. Waldron, you might have just been brought in as a participant. This is the public hearing. And if you are able to join us, please provide some information. I just know that when you're online, sometimes when you transfer, you lose track of what's going on for just a moment. Okay, we can see you now. No audio yet. Today's technology. Oh, so possibly, is it like *6 or something if they're muted, not on their phone, but on Zoom? Or *9. It's one of those.
Right.
So yeah, there may be, even though your phone doesn't show mute, sometimes it's the,
And he also might be,
Is that it? I think I got it.
there it is.
Very good.
It's tricky because you can't even
Okay,
see
great.
that. And now we hear you.
Well, commissioners, thank you for considering this project. And it's great to see you all. The project is now slated for 39 unit buildings, 2 family buildings and a senior building. We've been working with local architect and contractors to get things going. And, you know, we do have some due diligence to do on it, but everything's been looking very positive. We've got pre-application funding in for it. And we plan to release our traffic studies in phase 1 as soon as we can get a PSA signed. You know, the city's been really supportive of it. Some things to work through, but I think it could be a really great project for La Pine, the economic growth, the homeless issue, the affordability of housing in La Pine. And we're just really excited to be at this point with everyone.
Great, thank you very much. So one question, maybe for both Christy and yourself, is I know that there's a transportation area plan and Pam Lane coming up the middle there. Is that part of this, or is that just north of where Pam Lane was proposed?
There could be an impact, and when we talked to the city said they would just work with it. I know that the city adopted the Wickiup Junction refinement plan, but it sounds like there's still some flexibility in that area, so it didn't seem to be a real major concern for the city.
Okay, so Tommy, have you crossed paths with that? There's the area transportation plan shows maybe a back road on the inside off of Drafter Road. So that may be something that comes up in the near future from your point of view, if you have these lands available.
Yeah, we have seen that. Same as what Christy said. It's something the city said they'll deal with it at a later date. So we're not quite sure how that's going to plan out, but we do see that as a possibility.
Great, okay. Thank you very much for joining us. So being the public hearing, is there anybody else to speak on this matter? And yeah, so anything else, Tommy?
Nothing on my end. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing on this matter. So the public hearing is complete. So the next step is a possible motion or other discussion.
Oh, Christy, I do have a question. Property number 3, the 1.12 acre, it shows value is 0 on our information. It's 0.
Yeah, so we report that information, even though it's not to my understanding, it's not the assessor's office typical thing that they do is they don't typically put values or renew the values in terms of real market value on county owned property. So we're reporting that for information, but it's not updated information.
Okay.
So yeah, it hasn't been reassessed in a long time. So it just ended up with this number.
All right.
Okay.
I would like to know a little bit more about kind of the interactions with the city and kind of their process for evaluating this project and then potentially approving it moving forward. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those steps, broadly, what those steps look like?
Sure. So I did sit in on the pre-app meeting with Foundation for Affordable Housing in the city. And so Jeff Wolschlager, city manager, was present. The biggest concern that the city had was potential traffic impacts because of Drafter Road, and that ODOT is trying to minimize access points and in traffic coming out of those kind of side entrance or egress points on and off of 97. And so one of the things, so before Foundation for Affordable Housing was to invest more time and energy and effort into this project, they definitely want to get through the traffic impact analysis. And so that's why they wanted to move forward with entering into a purchase and sale agreement with the county. So once we've got the purchase and sale agreement executed, which will be really quickly here, then they'll start down that path and then work with the city and see what that looks like. But that was really the only potential challenge that we heard during the pre-app process.
Great. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Yes, I move. Move approval of board order number 2023-034, authorizing the conveyance of property at 52721, 52711, and 52695 Drafter Road, Lapine, to the Foundation for Affordable Housing, and authorizing our Deschutes County property manager, Christy Bollinger, to execute the attached associated documents.
Second.
Any other discussion?
Well, I guess related to that motion, I just want to clarify whether that holds us to a certain to certain dollar amounts. There's been an offer and there'll be further negotiation on that, but this motion doesn't require us to work with that number, does it?
Well, the board order outlines the dollar amount for the purchase.
Okay. The one kind of additional concern question I have is with this recent Supreme Court decision related to tax foreclosed properties and the disposal of proceeds from that. If we are not trying to recover these dollars from these foreclosed properties for the taxing districts of Deschutes County, I actually don't see a reason why we wouldn't consider a lower price, actually, because I think that the housing that will be provided through this project is a great benefit to our community, and I want to support that. And the $500,000 is not again not necessarily going to Deschutes County or its taxing districts. So I'd be interested in us actually considering a lower price in light of this Supreme Court decision.
Well, there could be issues with that, given that the Supreme Court decision was regarding surplus funds being returned to the property owner. And so that's one of the issues as far as it's the surplus fund. Sorry, the surplus funds arguably should be returned to the property owner. And so that amount is not for us to just arbitrarily decide. Rather, it should be given back.
So the previous property owner that had let the property lapse with taxes.
Correct. And I don't know what that amount is. Obviously, that there was quite a bit of time since the property was foreclosed upon. But we would have to do some type of analysis as far as what that potential exposure would be regarding what they would possibly be entitled to.
I'm tracking you on that, but I mean, there have been, we have on a number of occasions donated or sold at, essentially discounted prices, property for affordable housing projects. And so is the issue just that we already have a potential agreement that I'm asking us to reconsider, or is the issue that, I guess what would preclude us from doing what we've done many times before and offering this property at a discounted price, or, in some cases, we have literally donated land for affordable housing projects, particularly in the city of La Pine.
Issue is that the Supreme Court decision has caused us to reevaluate our state foreclosure process. And so we need to be cognizant that now there's this constitutional argument that the keeping of the surplus property on the sale of these foreclosed properties, where under our state system, is returned to the state, correct?
Well, the
And so-
taxing all the local taxing districts.
Correct. So any of the governmental entities involved. Now, this Supreme Court decision has caused us to reevaluate our system and saying that technically any surplus funds have to be returned to the property owner.
Okay. So that, okay. So.
And there's attorneys currently that we are aware of that have been contacting counties or making arguments that they didn't sell the properties for the dollar amounts that they should have sold on the open market. So there is that concern. Now, where those claims will land, I don't know yet. It's too speculative.
So basically, we're locked into proceeding with this agreement or not doing anything at all, or?
You're not locked into proceeding with this agreement, but I think if you want to reevaluate the dollar amount that you're proposing to sell it out, I think further calculations, probably by county staff, would be prudent in order to calculate what we think they might possibly be owed.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add, before Foundation for Affordable Housing submitted their proposal, they had an appraisal done. And so the appraisal, I don't have the price per square foot off the top of my head. I didn't put the calculations in here, but they did offer a bit lower than the appraised value. It wasn't much lower, but it was, and Tommy might know that if he's still on, he might know the dollar amount specifically, but it wasn't much lower.
And so if we proceeded with a different, if we explored a different amount, we might be subject to legal challenge by representatives of the former property owner.
Potentially.
Okay, well, then I think we should probably just proceed with what we've got then.
Is Tommy still on? I mean, I do remember it was a bit less than what it was appraised for.
Is it, am I allowed to, can
Hi, I'm here.
public discuss who the former owner was? I mean, if we even have that information, I have no idea how long ago these properties were tax foreclosed on.
1987.
Yeah, we did offer a 20% discount to the appraised value. I really appreciate your thoughts on that, Phil. Certainly, we would love to get it at a lower value. We do have some really tight timelines right now that we're working with on our funding applications. So getting the PSA executed in the next couple days is hopefully by the end of the week is really critical to keeping on those timelines at this point. So really appreciate the thoughts. It does make sense, but I think given everything that's been discussed, it's probably just best to move forward, and so we can have our best shot at trying to get tax credits funded.
Thank you. Well, full speed ahead, please.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Item number 9, request for proposal from Deschutes County Community Justice Department for a new shelter and housing units for male justice involved individuals. Thank you for joining us today. So this is MAC money, emergency order money from the governor
Yes.
through our Central Oregon efforts.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Dee Holcomb from Community Justice. With me, I have some of our fine colleagues from Community Justice, Trevor Stevens, and Parole and Probation Officer Heather Symes. We have asked just a couple of minutes of your time this morning to share with you and seek your approval of the criteria and content of a request for proposals for a really exciting project that melds together some of our public safety and housing and shelter priorities that we have at the county. So I will turn it over to my colleagues for a quick presentation and again, a request for approval at the end. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. As Stevie said, my name is Trevor Stevens, and I'm the business manager for the Community Justice Department. So we are here today because we are seeking your input and approval to release an RFP. Let's see if I can get it to the next slide.
Oh, there
You
you
got
go.
support in the back for
There
it.
we go. Perfect. Thank you. And so we're seeking your input and approval to release a RFP 2023-751. So just some initial background. This was from the Governor's Emergency Order 2302. And that order was to provide funding for counties to create emergency housing. There were specific goals laid out in that order, and on the slide that kind of indicates what those were for the entire state of Oregon. In our county, COIC is managing the grant application process and the funds for our county. And so we have been working with them for this process. And next slide, please. Thank you. And so with Deschutes County Parole and Probation, we currently supervise consistently about 25 to 30 individuals who have restrictions that prevent them from having contact with minors or that have a condition that requires them to register as a sex offender. Many of these clients are it's really extremely difficult to place these individuals in housing within Central Oregon. And so many of these clients end up camping, or they have access to shelter sometimes and not other times. And so it just provides some interesting things for our office. And Heather Symes here with us today, and she just can provide some background. She has supervised this population, and she has definitely dealt with this in the past. So Heather, if you wouldn't mind commenting on just some of the difficulties there.
Good morning, Commissioners. So the difficulty for this population is there isn't available housing. They come out of institutions or off of or out of the court system, and they are there's nothing available. So they are camping or, just kind of transient, not even a set campsite, which makes the process of supervising these clients or this population very difficult. Trying to track them down, them having registration requirements that make it very hard for them to have to go back in every several days and update their community location, or they don't do it, which results in additional concerns for their legal process troubles. They don't have a stable foundation to start or build behavior change because they're always wondering where they're going to lay their head that night. So
awesome. Thank you, Heather. So as part of the grant process, we received a little over $1 million to contract with a community provider or outside provider to purchase and open a housing facility in Central Oregon. The goal will be to provide 8 shelter style beds and 2 more long-term style beds for this population specifically. So because of the amount and because of that process, we are issuing an RFP for that process. And if we could move to the next slide. So the RFP structure, it is a 24-question RFP process. It's about 20-page submission limit. So we ask that they use the questions that we provided there, provide the information they need, and stay within that 20-page limit to provide those applications. We just give the proposer some freedom to kind of explain what they think would be best for this process and what they could provide for Central Oregon in managing this process for us as a department and for us as a community. So we're giving a 1-month timeline. We'll send it out to local providers and we'll also post through the Daily Journal of Commerce. And the proposal will be due September 27th of this year. Next slide, please. So some of the requirements from the grant itself and also from us as a county, we, as a part of the grant process through COIC and through the governor's office, it must abide by low barrier principles. So what this means is that there can't be restrictions that prevent someone with a criminal background check, credit checks, or other barriers that would prevent them from coming into the house. It also means that we are still able to enforce safety requirements. And many of our individuals that we'll be working with, they're on supervision and they have those requirements. So those requirements will be part of their supervision, but not a part of the actual housing. So we're keeping those 2 separate. Those will remain with the individual as conditions of their supervision, but it won't be a admission requirement that they be in sober, they'll be sober at that time or something as a part of the housing itself. It'll be a part of their supervision requirements. So we're just keeping those separate because of the way the grant is structured. So each person will probably have a little bit of individual requirement just based on their supervision, which they will work directly with their parole and probation officer on what those and what that means. So we also are asking that the provider not restrict any conditions for admission based on sex-related offenses. So, or any levels. So we're asking that they consider all of the clients that release, and those are the individuals that we have the most trouble housing. So we've specifically put in the proposal that they are unable to put in any restrictions that would prevent those types of requirements. So next slide, please. And so the provider requirements are that they find a house in central location that is approved by the county. They can utilize a location that they already possibly own. We just have to work with them on that process. But what we cannot do is be taking shelter beds that are already shelter beds and converting them. It has to be brand new beds. So that's just the requirement there. But we can work with a provider that if they have a property that may work or something, or if they want to buy a property that's more expensive, we can utilize the funds to help them make that purchase. They would just still have to agree to the requirements for that entire property in terms of the covenants and the restrictions that come into place for that. So they will provide on-site management at least 40 hours a week, and they will provide housing stability services. We also put in a preference there for certified recovery mentor services and just connection to other ancillary services that we usually see with this type of housing. So next slide, please. Just some ideas of some sample questions that we put in there just so you guys have more kind of an idea of what it looks like. We have a question in there, just please describe any past experience your agency has working with justice involved individuals, including individuals who have restrictive conduct conditions or who are required to register as a sex offender. And then please describe what process you will use to find a location in Central Oregon, outline the challenges that you anticipate, outline any feedback process that you will put in place for the community, and then also outline how you will work within restrictions because of this population. There are specific OARs in place where this individuals cannot be near a park, a school, or a place where children congregate. So how will they work within those restrictions? Just asking these providers to really provide us some examples of how they would really do that in that process. A few additional, next slide, please. Sample questions include, imagine you have found the perfect location for the house. You are heading in to sign the papers and complete the purchase. You receive a phone call from an angry neighbor who has learned that the house is going to be there. What would you tell that neighbor and how would you handle that? We really want this provider to work well with the community and really reach out to those individuals of where this location is going to be. So we really want to get an idea before we decide on who we're going to select, how they would do that and what process they would use for that. So other questions include, what do you anticipate being the biggest challenges for this property? And then just what kind of staffing and management arrangements would you propose for this type of housing process? So at this time, we were just, next slide, please. We would just like to seek the board if they have any other questions they would like us to add or any other specific things they would really want us to make sure we pull out for the RFP process. So I will defer to you if you have any additional things that you would like us to make sure we add in there.
So Trevor, not how close, what is the distance from a park or a school?
You remember the exact?
Yeah, I believe it's 1,000 feet.
Okay. But does that mean they can be closer than that to a neighborhood?
It could be within a neighborhood. There is a possibility. Yeah.
Okay.
What does a business model look like for the operator? As in, is there reoccurring revenue? Is there a rental requirement? Is that paid by parole and probation or the registered person being?
All of the above.
Yeah,
So
okay.
some of the clients that we have actually have resources to be able to pay for housing and they just can't find a spot. Other places will people will be releasing them from prison. We pay for some of that through treatment transition funds. So it'll be actually a combination of all of the above for that type of funding model.
Because that'll be part of this also.
Yes, and
Nice
that's
to have the seed funds, but then
Yeah.
keeping the doors open and keeping it maintained.
Yeah, we were throughout the process, by providing such a nice upfront amount to purchase the property, that creates a huge amount of equity, obviously, in the property. And I guess there are different programs around the state sort of utilize equity in a different way for operational costs. So it's a really great way. The grant wouldn't really pay for operational costs because it's got to be completed. Somebody, is taking occupancy January 10th, 2024. But by creating this huge equity, there's a way to be creative and for them to utilize that in terms of their ongoing operational costs, in addition to any kind of client by client rent or subsidy that we might provide through our normal process that's already budgeted for.
I don't have any questions. I think this is a really well thought out proposal. I'm glad that the MAC and the state recognize that. And I appreciate what adult PNP is trying to do here to both improve and enhance supervision of the people who you are supposed to be supervising, and also to address one of the subpopulations of homeless in our community, and provide opportunities for those people to exit homelessness. So thank you.
Thank you. And the next slide, please.
One more slide. Not on the display.
And I can just summarize there. So in terms of the considerations that we're considering, we're really looking at that unique site requirements, just the public safety concerns that come with those, and just making sure that the provider has some expertise around dealing with this population and just providing the service for our community. Next slide. This just kind of outlines our evaluation criteria that we plan to utilize. You will see in there, as you mentioned, Commissioner DeBone, for financial creativity, we put something in there just to kind of really look at whether or not the individual, what kind of things they put in place to kind of make sure this facility is able to operate for a long term throughout the entire process. So, and the next slide. So what parole and probation's role will be is that we will provide some additional supports in the terms of public safety and accountability and some behavior change. And Heather will just provide some examples of just what she does for home visits that this property could expect. That just provides a different sort of accountability than just a traditional housing or shelter space.
So the great thing about these kind of communal housing is you can meet with not only the person that you're there to see or the person that you supervise, but also the other people in the home. They all expect and know that you'll be coming by. You can get multiple home visits done a week, depending on how many people on supervision are living in that residence and what different officers are supervised by. We go in, we walk through the residence, any common areas or places that the person that we supervise is controlling or occupying. So it leads to, usually in my experience, a lot of compliance, because everybody in the home knows that somebody's PO is going to show up at some point and walk through. And it also gives a lot of opportunity for us to speak with our clients, like my client on supervision, but also, my field partners that I know, or somebody else that I know from the office, and kind of get those updates, check in, see how they're doing, see their areas, what they've got going on. So these communal living houses are really really nice for that. And we get a lot of just interaction with clients and accountability.
And the next slide, please.
Trevor, does the property title stay in the name of the county then?
It does not. It goes into the private provider, but a restrictive covenant is put in place for 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
And so we also provide additional support in terms of administrative support for this process. We will be retaining the grant management of this, the grant reporting, and we also have an administrative analyst who works closely with our housing. So she will work closely with this in terms of allocation, scheduling, and we do this with our current providers. So this will just be additional support that we can provide this provider that they won't have to hire people for, just because it'll be part of the grant process. And also it benefits us to have this as a resource. So we will continue to provide the support and have that connection to the house. So, and I'll turn it over to Devi for our final ask. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just want to thank you for listening. I know you'll see provided pending your approval on this RFP, pending that we get an actual provider that meets all qualifications and is selected. You will again see this come before you for approval of provider, and then any kind of continuing updates that you may want to see. We do understand this. It's a unique project. We have seen it done and be successful other places, but all the pieces do have to come together. And we are very concerned. We know that the public is concerned about who lives in their communities and who their neighbors are. So we want to be really upfront, transparent, and answer questions for you as you get them. And of course, as our provider or we ourselves get them. So we thank you. Any last questions, of course, if you have any additions, revisions that you'd like to see on the qualifications, or at this time, we request your approval of RFP document 2023.751.
So yeah, I support this RFP. It's just kind of open-ended. Let's start the discussion. This is the public, presentation of this matter to make sure people understand what we're talking about. The Multi-Agency Coordination Committee, the MAC committee that received these dollars from the governor's emergency orders, has already basically said, oh, it's worth $1 million and it will help with a subpopulation. So this is a community effort in many aspects. And this is the starting point, putting the RFP out to the world. Any other discussion or motion?
I'll move to authorize staff to issue document number 2023-751, a request for proposals for a new shelter and housing units for male justice-involved individuals.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner Adair?
Yes.
And chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Item number 10, deliberations, repeal of the conventional housing combining zone. So this is deliberations on the matter. Hearing previously. Thanks for joining us, Rachel.
Right. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, Rachel Vickers, Associate Planner with the Community Development Department. The item before us today is deliberations to repeal DCC 18.92, the conventional housing combining zone. Just a quick recap, this staff initiated text amendment is twofold. First, to bring us in alignment with some recent updates to state statute. And second, this repeal is identified on the 2020 rural housing profile as a way to bring more affordable housing options to the county. The board held a public hearing 2 weeks ago on August 9th and closed the oral record and left the written record open for 1 week. In that time, staff confirmed all record materials, including the PC packet, were uploaded to the record. Staff did receive one public comment during the open record period in opposition to the proposal, which included a list of questions as well as concerns about availability of time to respond to the proposal. Staff responded to all of the commenters' questions and has not heard back. And as a reminder, staff received one other public comment in opposition before the Planning Commission hearing that also expressed similar concerns with time available to respond to the proposal. Because this is a repeal of county code and there aren't many decision points, staff has not prepared a deliberations matrix. However, staff is looking for board direction on whether you would like to, 1, move approval of the amendments as drafted, 2, move approval of the amendments with suggested edits or recommendations, or 3, move to deny the amendments. And at this time, staff is available for questions.
Is the map available for display today? Just maybe hearing it for the first time.
I believe it was uploaded.
It's part of the package.
I did not have it.
So these are 3 areas, 2 kind of north of Bend and 1 east of Bend, neighborhood type, rural development neighborhood type areas. I just think of the history of this, how did this even come to be? There must have been a point in time in the 70s or 80s where it wasn't cool to be putting a manufactured home out there. I don't know exactly what it was, but.
Yeah, so I think as staff mentioned during the public hearing, there wasn't a lot of available information based on county records back then, but as much as staff could tell, these areas, the one to the west of Tumalo, one to the east of Tumalo, and one to the east of Bend was created by petition, neighborhood petition. So those property owners that signed the petition kind of set the bounds. So that's why you get kind of the geological difference in areas. But while it was started by petition, it was still adopted into county code. So the process to repeal is the process we're following right now.
Well, and I know from experience, and we talked about it recently, that kind of the definition of a B, or C manufactured home, difference between putting a home on a foundation with shingle roofs and wood siding opposed to a single wide trailer with maybe corrugated roof and aluminum siding. So big difference. But as I say, we don't even see as much of that anymore. So that it just feels like this was a point in time. So it's kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, or are there any edits today?
Yeah. So we'd just be looking for one of those 3 motions to either repeal as proposed, make any changes, or deny the amendments. And the document, I can give a reference, as ordinance number 2023-019.
Any other thoughts?
Well, they've definitely improved manufactured homes in today's world. We've seen some of those, such as at the Veterans Village, and they're really the upgrades have been outstanding. So I think it's important to add this element to our county for more affordable housing, because there's still that cost factor that people could afford to buy a manufactured home. Maybe that's where they're going to start when they do their project, and then later they're going to build something. But I think it's a good change for those 3 areas.
In the really big picture, we've seen in the United States how zoning and land use have been used to discriminate against low-income people across our 50 states. And this conventional housing combining zone that we are considering today, I actually would identify as a discriminatory practice that was trying to keep certain kinds of people out of certain areas of our community, and I'm happy to see it go. So these are deliberations on the matter. It sounds like there's support from the discussions we're having here. So either move approval as drafted or amendments.
I move to approve the amendments as drafted. The staff initiated text amendment file number 247-23-000-391 TA to repeal the conventional housing combining zone.
Second.
So then we're going to put direction to this. Would we get to the ordinance today, or?
I did bring the ordinance with me.
We'd be ready for that since there's no proposed edits.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to this vote and then even do the ordinance if we're ready. So It's been moved and seconded to show support for this following deliberations. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So as I say, even a more formal support is proposing first reading of ordinance then.
Yeah. Yeah. So the ordinance, I believe, was included.
It's included.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm just,
Yes. So I move approval of ordinance number 2023-019, amending our Deschutes County Code Title 18.
And sorry, just to clarify, I did include two options, one by emergency and one not by emergency. So just looking for direction on the board if you want to adopt by emergency or just by title.
I don't know.
You can just say by emergency and emergency order
Yes,
in title only.
by emergency and title only. So amended. My motion.
Second.
So this will be for first and second reading then.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, that's going to be for the minutes, first and second reading by title only and by emergency. So that motion was made and seconded. Any other discussion? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. So now I'm going to proceed with the first and second reading. This is ordinance number 2023-019, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, Chapter 92 to repeal the conventional housing combining zone and declaring an emergency. And this will be second reading. An ordinance number 2023-019, an ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 18, Chapter 92 to repeal the conventional housing combining zone and declaring an emergency. So then to complete the process, we can a motion for adoption.
I move adoption of ordinance number 2023-019.
Yes.
And we don't need to give the title of the ordinance.
I think it's just by
It's fine. I think
Yeah,
the record's
second.
clear.
been repeated. Okay, so our ordinance number 2023-019, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? See none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. There you go. It's all the way done now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
At this time, item number 11, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Deer Mule presentation and relationship building, I'll call it.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner. I'm here with the Oregon, or representatives from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, not the entire agency, just a few people. This comes on the heels of the withdrawal of the mule deer inventory update project, which was alluded to earlier this morning at the end of June. So upon the conclusion of that project, the board expressed interest in hearing directly from ODFW. It was acknowledged during that project, kind of from all around all of the comments and from ODFW, as well as other experts, that the issues facing influencing mule deer population decline, that project was addressing the specific land use regulations, but people recognize that this is a multifaceted issue. So upon the conclusion of that project, which only kind of was addressing one aspect of that, we have ODFW here to address, just talk about their efforts currently, in the past, in the future, to look at this holistically, the issues of mule deer population decline in the region. They're going to give a presentation, and I'll let you introduce all of your team yourself. And then they'll open it up to Q&A from the board. So thanks so much to ODFW for being here, and I'll just sit back and let you go. Thanks.
Excellent. Is to say thanks for joining us. As part of this is just relationship building and communication back and forth, education for both parties, and for the community also. So let's just start with that.
Excellent. Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for having us. My name is Andrew Walsh. I'm the district wildlife biologist for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm based in the Bend office here, and I'll let Corey introduce himself.
Yeah, Chair DeBone, Commissioners, my name is Corey Heath. I'm the Deschutes Watershed Manager, also based here in Bend. Also with us today, we have two habitat biologists that you may encounter in the course of our work and your work in the future that may testify in front of you. We have Jamie Bowles. She's our Deschutes Watershed Habitat Biologist. And Jessica Clark is the district habitat biologist, also both based here in Bend. The areas of responsibility, I might add, like for myself, I oversee parts of all or parts of 10 different counties. Jamie works in the same area. Andrew and Jessica are local. They have all or parts of 4 different counties here locally. So.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent. I'll see if this. Yep, perfect.
Oh, it's working.
So yeah, we'll kind of just wanted to start off with a few primer slides. You know, everything falls back to our missions. And the mission of ODFW is to protect and enhance Oregon's fish and wildlife and their habitats for use and enjoyment by present and future generations. So that's what frames, you know, everything we try to do. You know, and our role in land use, primarily when it comes to land use, ODFW is a non-regulatory agency. You know, we provide information and science-based recommendations to counties. But otherwise, we're kind of relying on the counties and their implementation of the statewide Goal 5, you know, protections for wildlife habitat and other natural features. You know, we do have a state wildlife habitat mitigation policy that's in the Oregon Administrative Rule. We do reference that occasionally on larger scale projects, especially, you know, like big game winter range impacts, that calls for no net loss of habitat quality or quantity and to provide a net benefit. But again, primarily it's those Goal 5 protections that, you know, county by county throughout the state are providing the protection for wildlife.
So a little bit of help with the terminology there. So the second item was mitigation policy, category 2 habitats. Can you explain that?
Yes. So there's 6 different categories of habitats in that OAR. Category 2 being kind of the, you know, second from the top, you know, essential and limited. You know, category 1 would be like irreplaceable, and then kind of down the chart until you get to, you know, like a parking lot, you know, category 6. So being essential and limited on the landscape that's what triggers that that requirement to provide no net loss and a net benefit because of just the limited nature of whatever habitat we're talking about. That's category 2, in this case, big game winter range, the limited nature of that on the landscape. And I'll go a little bit more into some winter range information in a couple slides.
Well, so the Goal 5 planning process, is that a different path than the habitat mitigation policy, or?
Yes, in that the Goal 5 process is kind of a county adopted, you know, that's the arena you guys work in. And then as a state agency, occasionally we will fall back on that state policy, the Oregon Administrative Rule.
Great, thank you.
So just a little bit more background of how we do our jobs as wildlife managers for the state of Oregon. On the left-hand part of the slide there, you can see how we've divided the state up into 65 or so different wildlife management units, WMUs. That's generally the scale that we collect data and manage most, especially game species of wildlife at. And on the right-hand side of your slide, I threw a couple different boundaries over the top of each other. You can see Deschutes County's outline in blue there. The overall big red outline is the district that I'm responsible for based out of the Bend office, the Deschutes Wildlife District. It encompasses, like Corey mentioned, you know, parts of 4 counties. Obviously, Deschutes is the primary county, but I've also got substantial portions of Jefferson, Klamath, and Lake counties. 3.6 million acres of habitat out there. And also the black underlying lines there are those WMUs, like in the other image on the slide there. So kind of, I wanted to highlight this because in the past there's been questions about what's the population of XYZ wildlife species in Deschutes County. And that's just not the scale at which we count or manage wildlife. We're doing it at this WMU scales. And you can see the overlap of how the county, it's a messy boundary issue. You know, as a statewide agency, we're managing them on those wildlife management unit levels. So just to focus for a second on some mule deer winter range, since it's been a hot topic the last few years.
Pardon me,
yes.
Going back one again. I just got it as you were changing. So is on the right side, is that 3 wildlife management units? Is that?
Yeah, so it's parts of 5, but the Metolius is the furthest north there. And then the Upper Deschutes, kind of west of Bend here, west of Highway 97, and the Polino east of Highway 97. Then out on
So
then
it's not including all of 3, it's all of 3 plus parts of other ones. So yeah, I was just coming to that as I was looking at the map as you
Yep.
changed the.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so that it just makes for, we share split units with our neighbors, like even you can see the eastern portion of Deschutes County there is outside of my district, north of Highway 20. So that's managed by my counterpart out of Prineville, our Prineville office. So it just leads to some messy boundary things when it's a county specific process in question.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
So Mule Deer Winter Range, what is it? It's, generally speaking, it's lower elevation areas that provide the necessary shrubs for forage, security cover, thermal refuge during the cold winter months, relatively less snowpack than the higher elevations where they spend their summers. It's, as we were saying, it's limited on many landscapes. And so that's why it's always been kind of the most important habitat, through historic wildlife management, the most important habitat for big game management. When a mule deer is on their winter range, when a mule deer in the winter months, the body condition of mule deer is declining. And our goal is just to reduce that decline as much as we can by having intact habitat. That makes all the difference whether they're going to make it through that winter and be in good shape going into the next spring to have their fawns. The winter range habitat in these lower elevations is naturally, where a lot of human development occurs for the same reasons. We want to be down out of the snow in the wintertime, and it's generally the flatter, more developable land. So that leads to the susceptibility of mule deer winter range to disturbance and fragmentation throughout the West. It's not a Central Oregon unique issue. It's throughout mule deer range in the Western United States. So this just shows kind of the trend of our mule deer population estimates here locally, just in the Deschutes district. The red line is the management objective of where, the populations, what our target populations based on the management objectives are set by, public processes. So this is what members of the public and the agency have decided we're managing towards. So this is the, where the trend has been going locally and throughout most of Eastern Oregon. So just kind of a little bit more background on how we do what we do. A lot of the management is driven by the numbers we gain the data, and this is how we collect the majority of our data on mule deer. I'll start on the right-hand part of the slide there with our surveys. In the fall, generally December time, after hunting season, we get our ratios of mule deer, both buck to doe ratios and fawn to doe ratios. And that's right as winter is starting up. They're down on their winter range. They've made it through fall. So we get those ratios for management of the population. And then late winter, February, March is when we get our estimates for the population of mule deer. They're concentrated down on their winter range, which is generally more open habitat where we're able to count them from the helicopter. So we do a survey technique that's kind of a random sample and run it through a statistical model to get our best population estimate for mule deer that are existing on that winter range. Right now, we're doing that every 3 years in any given area across Eastern Oregon. And then a little later in the spring, right as they're kind of coming out of that winter, is when we get our doe or fawn to adult ratios, and you're able to calculate a rough overwinter fawn survival. Winter's obviously the hardest on fawns. They have the smallest body size and greatest loss of heat and struggle to get through deep snow and those sorts of things. So that's how we kind of get our ratios that we manage towards. On the left-hand side of the slide there, is how we get a lot of our really precise and useful spatial data on mule deer. GPS collars have came a long way in the last decade or so. Instead of just the old style, VHF telemetry collars where you have to go out with a wand and try to triangulate where the deer are. These collars are hooked up to satellites, collecting 2 to 5 locations a day for up to 3 years and uploading those locations to the satellite. So you're able to.
Carrying a cell phone, you know where you're at.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And we're able to go online at our desks. Well, these deer are still out there on the landscape and see exactly where they are at the last location. So super valuable, precise data for winter and summer range identification, migration route identification, and also how they're using that habitat. What areas on the land they're preferring, as well as, when we collar an animal, we get a notification when it dies. So we get survival rates, cause of mortality, those sorts of things. Real quick, just this locally, this is a lot of the data we fall back on. It was called the South Central Mule Deer Study, and it collared a huge number of mule deer from just north of Bend here all the way down through, Klamath and Lake counties as part of a large scale project with those GPS collars. And this data has been used in many ways, including the Highway 97 crossings I'm going to talk about in a little bit, as well as creating a couple habitat use models of how these deer are using the landscape, both in summer and winter time. I throw this slide up there just to give you an idea of some of that spatial data. It's pretty cool representation. You can see it's basically Deschutes County we're looking at there. Each different color is an individual mule deer doe, and those are the dots, of her seasonal movement. So you can see some of them, move a little between summer and winter, and others, in the southern part of the county and down into Lake County, those deer out on the desert are making huge migrations every year from their winter time out on the lower elevations up into the higher elevation forest for the summer. So that's just kind of an idea of what some of that data looks like on the back end. And then, we can put it through statistical, create models to be able to identify the statistical relevance of these different areas and usefulness to mule deer. I've used this slide a lot through the previous process and the previous public meetings, and I'm going to run through it right now really quickly and then drill in on each of these different topics through the rest of the presentation. So, mule deer, again, this isn't a situation unique to Central Oregon. They're declining through much of their range throughout the West and certainly in most of Eastern Oregon. What are the factors? Well, there's no one factor. We're coming out of hopefully we have a few more good wet springs like we've just had, but we're in the midst of a historic drought. That does not help. And roadkill with increased highway traffic on all of our roads. That's a factor. Disease is a factor. Again, I'm going to drill in on these more going forward. Predation, disturbance, habitat alteration, and fragmentation. These all have an impact on mule deer and other wildlife, whether it's a direct impact like predation or roadkill, or indirect impact that's just impacting the fitness of them like habitat and disturbance. It's when we have a collared deer that we get a notification that it's died, and you go out there and it was killed by a cougar, that's a pretty easy to identify proximal cause of death. But what you don't see is whether the fitness of that deer was reduced via disturbance on their winter range or, impacted habitat. The fitness of those deer is tougher to quantify, but it's all part of the equation. It can make them more susceptible to disease, predation, roadkill if they're having to move around because the habitat's inferior. It's all connected and not super clean cut when it comes to these factors. But what we do know is kind of the depressing fact at the bottom of the slide there. Through our current research over the last 8 years, for the area west of Bend here, the Metolius and the Upper Deschutes Wildlife Management Units, the adult does that we have collared out there have a 70% annual survival rate. That is the lowest in Eastern Oregon in our mule deer herds. Kind of a benchmark baseline is 80% annual survival by adult does to kind of maintain a habitat or a population, assuming you have decent fawn ratios. So it's just mathematically not possible to maintain or grow a mule deer herd with that annual survival of does. It's going to go down. And that's where we're at locally here. So to kind of zoom in, I know it's a little bit of a busy slide, but the first thing folks always, sometimes we hear, why are you still hunting mule deer if the populations, are in decline? So, we like to point out a few things. We've drastically reduced mule deer tags locally and throughout most of Eastern Oregon. In 1991, mule deer hunting went from just general season, anybody can get a tag and go hunting, to a controlled draw lottery system where we are able to limit the number of hunters in any given area in those wildlife management units. So in the bar graph in the bottom there is just an example of 3 of the local units here, the Upper Deschutes, the Paulina, and the Metolius, and the drop in tag numbers that we have in those areas since that change. One more thing to point out, we do not hunt does in most of Eastern Oregon, but Central Oregon, we're not hunting mule deer does anymore. This is buck only harvest. And we manage for those post hunting season buck ratio management objectives that I mentioned earlier in our surveys in December after hunting season, when we get those bucks per 100 does. In the top chart there in the black font, you can see we have management objectives, not just for the population numbers, but also for our buck ratios, where we want to see those buck ratios. And locally, it's either 15 bucks per 100 does or 25 bucks per 100 does. Again, that's a kind of a publicly decided on number. And generally we are at or above that ratio after our hunting seasons here locally. And you can see where we were after this last one, above all of them. So, the science behind that is that there's bucks available on the landscape after your hunting season to breed those does in November and December. You're not causing population decline because there are does out there that aren't getting bred. You have plenty of bucks available. That's
Andrew, when we see poaching, I mean, many people have identified poaching as a concern in our region. Are people poaching male and female deer? I mean, is it pretty indiscriminate, or is it?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Commissioner. It can certainly be both, and I'll have a slide about our poaching initiative in a bit here, but it kind of depends on their focus, right? Certainly some people are out there looking for, trophy antlers, and they poach, those large males. But also if people are poaching more as you're looking for meat objective, then they're probably fairly indiscriminate. And that's when, some doe poaching would happen for sure. So yeah, that's kind of the science behind hunting and management, and where we are locally with that. So to move through, these are all kind of new slides that I haven't given in the previous talks. Move through kind of what ODFW does for mule deer to address all these other factors. Habitat work. In 2009, ODFW created the Mule Deer Initiative. It was a commitment to try to address declining mule deer populations 14 years ago. The Mule Deer Initiative was this large project, and it included habitat improvement, predator control, changes in regulations, and new survey methodologies to estimate our populations in a few select wildlife management units throughout Eastern Oregon. So just to drill down on the habitat part of the Mule Deer Initiative for a bit, the first phase, the first 5 years, 2010 to 2015, $18 million was spent on habitat work, treating 266,000 acres or units of treatment. I will point out 87% of those funds came from partners, often federal agencies, us leveraging federal funds with our state hunter dollars. So it's not not a solely ODFW thing. It's a very collaborative across other agencies and interest groups. The second phase, 2015 through 2019, another $25.5 million was spent on habitat work. Looking at 387,000 treatment units. Again, the majority of that is from partners. And we're kind of strategically across the landscape, leveraging these funds both on public and private lands. And just to kind of tease out juniper cutting, because that's one of the big habitat improvements we do here in Central Oregon. So $13.6 million were spent on juniper cuts during that second phase, totaling 133,000 acres. So the photo here on the right is an example of a unit on private land out of Prineville that we treated as part of the Mule Deer Initiative. And you can see the juniper, it's a very even stand of relatively young juniper coming up through that shrub ecosystem. You can see the bitterbrush and sagebrush and bunch grasses. And what's happening is that's all post-European settlement juniper. It's 40 or 60 years old since fire suppression really took over. We got really good at putting out fires. The juniper is really expanded in range, and what happens is it takes over these stands. This is a stand of phase 2 juniper that's actively growing, using up a lot of water, and it also crowds out all that good bitterbrush and shrub component that naturally, with a normal fire regime, is what would dominate that stand. And that's what's important for mule deer on their winter range, is that shrub component. So that's kind of an example of the habitat work and some of the juniper treatments we've done locally.
So
Was that done in Crook County or in Deschutes?
So that one was Crook County, as part of the Mule Deer Initiative. The Mowry unit south of Prineville was one of those select areas. But there certainly are a lot of juniper cuts, through the BLM and other entities that we participate in through in Deschutes County.
And then do you have a kind of a rule of thumb? Is this making a difference? Is this, 2010 to 15 efforts? Do you look back thinking, man, we got something done there, or sure spent a lot of money on that?
Right. Yeah. And it's tough with habitat work because, it takes a while for the stand to respond, for the landscapes to respond. So the best you do is make good habitat out there. And, it takes a while for, wildlife populations to rebound even after the stand of vegetation rebounds. We've created a lot of really good habitat out there for mule deer and sage grouse. That's the other big species that a lot of this is leveraged off of. So yeah, it's created a lot of good habitat.
The Mule Deer Initiative, is that statewide or Eastern Oregon or Central Oregon, or what's the scope of that?
Yep. So it's throughout the range of mule deer in Oregon, which is east of the Cascade Crest. Yep. So another hot topic is poaching. And it's always been a focus of ours, but in recent years we've really drilled down with the help of a lot of key legislation in 2019 that was passed to really put a focus on the poaching of fish and wildlife. For those that don't know, we are not game wardens in the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We rely on our sister agency with the Oregon State Police. They have a Fish and Wildlife division that does our law enforcement work for us. So we work hand in hand with those folks, and they're the ones out there, writing the tickets and doing the operations. They've been able to gain 2 specially trained dogs you may have seen in the news to just focus on poaching cases since this, over the last 2, 3, or 4 years, as well as in 2022, the Oregon Department of Justice hired the first anti-poaching prosecutor who's just, kind of a statewide roving focus on poaching cases, which should really help a lot. These poaching cases are really important to us, but they're not always the most important thing going on for a county prosecutor. So that's a really helpful addition to this anti-poaching initiative, as well as, ODFW through that legislative action now has a new position that is just focused solely on this effort, anti-poaching coordinator. And they've just within the last month, I think, launched this new website at the bottom of the page here, protectoregonswildlife.com. With a lot of partners on all different sides of wildlife, the wildlife spectrum. Everybody can join hands and be out raising awareness and being against poaching. Predation, cougar management, cougars certainly are, a top predator on the landscape. And deer, mule deer and black-tailed deer are their primary prey species. In 1994, ballot measure 18 was passed in Oregon, which banned the use of hounds to hunt cougars and bears, which is the most effective way if one is to want to pursue cougars as a hunting opportunity. The use of hounds is by far the most effective way to do that. So since that was since that was outlawed, numbers of cougars have certainly increased in Oregon. I included from our late, we manage all species of game wildlife. We have a management plan for. The Oregon Cougar Management Plan was last updated in 2017 and put through our Fish and Wildlife Commission. So that's what guides our management.
So Andrew, the
Yep.
number here, it says it's from 15.
Mhm.
So what do you, on the estimate 6493, what's your estimate now?
It should be close to that. So those numbers are from that 2017 management plan. So we don't have a survey methodology to fly around in a helicopter and count cougars. They don't, unfortunately, for trying to figure out the exact number of them, they don't all go congregate like mule deer or elk do for us to count. So we rely on modeling the populations via the samples we get whenever one is harvested or taken on damage or hit by a car. We take teeth samples from it to get their age. If it's a female, we take the reproductive tract out of it to be able to identify how many litters of kittens they've had, how many kittens per litter, and then the age of that animal. And that all gets plugged into a model, and you're modeling the populations. But that mid 6,000s seems to be the current estimate there. So the other thing I'll point out on the slide is the map of Oregon there. The way we estimate those populations broken out geographically in those different zones. It's a little small to see, but it's the state's divided into 6 different zones. And of course, since we're in the middle of the state, Deschutes County, I think, is part of 3 of those zones. So when there's a cougar killed, we put it in one of these zones via what wildlife management unit it was taken in. But that's not going to help get a population estimate of county. And not only that, but those zones encompass, large swaths of the state that we're getting these estimates at. So yeah, again, just a geographic and distribution, dividing the state up issue. I will mention we've had cougar target areas in the past. You can see the figures on there in different parts of the state to target cougars and administratively remove them. And some of that was during the Mule Deer Initiative projects. And it's kind of had, mixed results, the impacts on deer and elk populations. One thing about target areas is once you stop, the cougar population rebounds really quickly. It's a maintenance thing that you have to keep doing if you're trying to have an impact on prey species out there. So another hot topic, especially lately, which is a good thing, is wildlife migration and highway crossings. Through a lot of different data, including that South Central study that I talked about earlier, and ODOT collision data, which I think is what the map on the screen there is. It's showing the hot spots for deer collisions on at least ODOT managed roads. We've been able to create an effort of getting crossings incorporated, especially on Highway 97 as the widening project moves south. We have 3 different crossing structures crossing, segments with a couple structures each on 97 now, working south, and the partnerships with ODOT and legislative support and the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, as well as many other groups, are helping with the fundraising. These things aren't cheap. And also the maintenance. Our local Bend OHA hunting group here single-handedly does the maintenance on the fence at these crossings on Highway 97 a couple times a year. And it's a fantastic partnership that shouldn't be overlooked. But there's just so much data coming out now, we did a big ODFW just completed the OCamp project, which is the Oregon Connectivity and Mapping Project. So it's a statewide, really handy map that shows some priority crossing areas throughout the state that we're working through. You may have heard of an effort locally on Highway 20, up kind of the border of Deschutes and Jefferson County. There's a large working group working on the feasibility of some crossing structures there. We all know how busy the highways are now compared to maybe 25 or 30 years ago. And that certainly makes an impact, especially on these mule deer that are crossing at least twice a year. If they're a migratory deer, they're having to cross Highway 20 or Highway 97, or sometimes both, at least twice a year. So you can see the trail cam photo down there from one of the new crossings down around Gilchrist. That's from this last winter, and a nice big group of mule deer following another group of mule deer under the crossings. In the bottom right, it's a pretty slick publication that ODFW just completed. I have a copy. I'm going to get to each of you when I'm done talking here, but it's a pretty good outline of how we gather the data and what we're doing with it when it comes to connectivity. And the wildlife license plate, I'm sure you're starting to see more and more in town. That's a Oregon Wildlife Foundation effort that is directing money towards wildlife passage throughout the state. Public land management, as the commission knows, 80% of land in Deschutes County is publicly owned. And a lot of it's really important mule deer habitat, both summer and winter habitat. ODFW is not a land manager, except for, a few of our wildlife areas that we do own the property. None of those are in Deschutes County. Otherwise, we rely on partnerships and cooperation with those land managers, primarily Forest Service and BLM here locally. Cooperative TMAs, you're probably familiar with some of our winter road closures. That's the Tumalo map on the screen there, here west of town, December 1st through March 31st. Select roads in there are closed to motorized vehicles to try to just give the wildlife a break.
What's a TMA?
The travel management area. Sorry. Thank you. I try to keep the acronyms.
I was looking for it up and down there.
Yes. Thank you. Travel management area. So during select times of the year, we're through cooperation with those federal agencies and affected private landowners, closing all but a few of the mainline roads to motorized travel. In the wintertime, it's pretty important. We have the Tumalo one, we have one up in the Metolius, and then we have one down around Fort Rock, that in those key winter ranges to hopefully just not bump those deer, elk, and other wintering wildlife around as much. So that's one tool for wildlife management on public land. Also, we're pretty involved with commenting on U.S. Forest Service and BLM projects at all phases, through their scoping and implementation. We try to use some of those models that we've created on habitat use from the South Central study to guide their work, whether it's vegetative, fuels reduction, or recreation planning. Also, there's a relatively new program called the Good Neighbor Authority, which allows federal agencies to kind of have us spend some of the money that they have to do projects that they just don't have the ability to get through. So it's a good partnership with BLM and Forest Service that some areas are doing some pretty good work with. I think we'll wrap up with disease in mule deer. Chronic wasting disease, you've probably heard of. Luckily, that's, as you can see on the map there of the US, it's been working its way west. It's a really tough disease once it gets here. It's a prion that is really difficult to get rid of once it's in your herd and on your landscape. It's a always fatal disease of cervids, deer and elk. And, it can persist in the soil after a deer has it and dies. It can persist in the soil and potentially be ingested by another deer. And so it's a really bad disease. So we monitor, the protocol is monitoring as much as we can to nip it in the bud. A couple of years ago, it was found in Idaho, not far from the northeastern Oregon border. Over the last 20 years, since it kind of came on the scene further east, ODFW has processed over 27,000 samples from deer and elk, just kind of screening for this. There's increased focus in recent years, a lot of federal money coming down. It's that important of an issue nationwide. And ODFW now just recently has a dedicated CWD biologist and an operations plan that we've created to be ready. A couple other diseases that are prevalent and persistent in Central Oregon. AHD is the biggest one, adenovirus hemorrhagic disease. There's, it's kind of always in the population. It's a virus that's spread by nose-to-nose contact. Sometimes people feeding wildlife can make it worse because they're abnormally concentrating. But it's a hemorrhagic disease that's causing their chest fluid, chest to fill up with fluid, and they die, within a few days of getting it. Otherwise, healthy deer, just is not able to make it. And it flares up occasionally in Central Oregon, and it has contributed to some decline in the past, especially up like north of Sisters had a die-off, and a few other areas that has had noticeably large die-offs in the past. And EHD is a similar disease. It's spread by biting midges. It's a little less common around here, but it's also out there on the landscape.
So the AHD said nose-to-nose contact, and I've heard that before where, putting out a food pile or, any kind of non-natural feeding, they end up nose to nose, which is exactly how it'll spread.
Yeah, it does. It certainly doesn't help. You're concentrating them more, artificially concentrating large groups of deer, more so than they would be out on the landscape. Yep. So kind of the final slide, this is a plug for a really large process that ODFW is going through right now. Like I said before, we manage all these species based on management plans. It's been, almost 20 years since our last mule deer management plan. So we're working through an update right now, and it's a very large process and lift with a ton of public involvement and input on all sides of the issue. There's a couple of web pages here. If you just search, ODFW mule deer plan update, there's a whole web page dedicated to this stuff. But that's where, and I have a list of kind of the rough outline of chapters we're working through. I think we're about halfway through kind of the draft chapters. We're releasing them as we go, and then doing webinars. There's 2 or 3 recorded webinars on there. This is a Eastern Oregon wide effort that's, updating a pretty substantial update of what we do and how we manage mule deer in Oregon. With that, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and happy to chat or have any questions.
I got a couple of questions. As a property owner, green grass out in front and back of my house, is that good or bad for deer? Does it matter?
Sometimes in the spring they're targeting grass, but often what those deer are targeting within your grass is the clover or the little broadleaf. It's fine, I guess.
Yeah. Just rule of thumb.
Right.
Yeah. And then, what I see is when the deer groups go through, they'll walk across like the bunch grass and eat all the seeds off the top of the stem. So they're not even eating the grass per se as much as the seeds off the top of everything.
Yep. Generally deer are browsers more than grazers. Elk maybe would like that grass a little more. Deer are looking for those buds and those nibs. Yep.
What about aspen leaves and flame maple? And
aspen leaves are like candy.
Flowers. So and it's happening right now. All summer we haven't seen the deer as much. The leaves came up, but all of a sudden every morning there's less and less leaves all around.
Yep. It's like candy for them. Yeah.
That's interesting. Is it good for them?
Yeah. No, certainly that's a natural
digestible
browse.
or
Yep.
whatever. Okay. And then the flowers? No, I just, yeah.
Oh, no, the delphiniums. I have not seen one this summer. Like they really love them. It's like, okay. No, the really sad story is we just lost the buck that was in my neighborhood. I had 9 deer at my house. They live there all the time, and we only have a mile long road. We've got a couple slow down for the deer signs, you know, up and down the road. And that big buck was just killed a couple weeks ago. And it was so sad to see, you know, and I know we've lost a couple more just on our little road that, accordingly, I was told that Deschutes County picks up about 400 deer a year. The state roads are, I think, about 600. And then in Bend, 100 deer a year are killed. But it was really disappointing to see the loss. And you're telling me the ratio is like 1 to 4 or something. And I'm thinking like, well, I know the herd is still around because I see them across, they're still out eating like pretty religiously. So I don't really think they leave from our neighborhood.
That feeds to one of the questions I wanted to ask. At the root of some of the debates that we've had about mule deer and mule deer populations recently is the questions, that a lot of people have about whether the population is actually declining. So many people have said to me, I see them around my house all the time. I see them out in the field near my, near my property all the time. Can you speak a little bit about the population, the overall population of deer and how people should think about town deer and, other deer that stick around residential areas year round?
Yeah. Go for it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, Chair DeBonne, Commissioner Chang. It's a good question. Mule deer definitely are declining. There's no question about that. Not only locally in Deschutes County, but across the east side of the state and across the west. It's a pretty well accepted fact. Our data supports that. Deer still are present in the city limits of Bend and a lot of other towns in Central Oregon. Those typically in the summertime, those are resident deer that grew up here. They were born here as fawns. They don't migrate out. I've been here on this district in this area for quite a while, as probably a lot of you have. We used to inventory deer on Aubrey Butte right up here. We don't do that anymore. There are deer still there, but there aren't enough. It's all developed now. It's all houses. We used to count deer along the Deschutes Canyon rim down where Brookswood Road is now, Elk Meadow, all that. We don't do that anymore. There are deer there, but not very many. So for people that don't know what used to be here, there are still deer around. It appears like, yeah, there's a deer in my yard. There's 10 deer in my yard. There's plenty of deer around. That's not the case. It's a fraction of what was here historically. It's a fraction of what was here in just the last 20 or 30 years. The deer that we focus on managing are the deer outside of the city limits, outside of the incorporated areas where we can actually affect the change. We're not going to affect what's happened in the city limits of Bend. In the counties, where deer are still migratory, we feel we can affect the change in those areas still. So to answer your question, deer are definitely declining in spite of what appears to be plenty of deer still in the city limits. Those plenty of deer are a fraction of what used to be here locally in the city limits.
Thank you. My other question is around how we measure the success of our efforts. There are a number of people who have said, in relation to the overlay, the winter range overlay update, to poaching efforts, to predation control, to vehicle collision efforts. They say, well, how can you demonstrate to me that this is going to reverse the decline of our mule deer population if we do this? Part of what I want to emphasize to people is reversing the decline would be excellent, but just slowing the decline would also be really beneficial because we've seen such a dramatic decline in mule deer population in the last 10 or 20 years. Can you, you know, that this gets into, you know, probably really, really complicated and maybe undoable modeling efforts. But I mean, can you speak to that a little bit? You know, how valuable would it be just to slow the decline of our local mule deer populations? And you know, can we say whether some of the things we're doing, some of the initiatives you mentioned today, whether better protections for habitat would at least help to slow the decline?
Yeah, Chair DeBonne, Commissioner Chang, yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, you know, at least some of them. You know, we've heard the same arguments from folks from the public and throughout this Goal 5 overlay process of is this going to reverse the decline of mule deer and increase the population? You know, we can't look into the future. The best we can hope for is, like you just said, is to slow the decline. What our hopes are is that, yeah, we will reverse the decline, stop it and reverse it. We don't know that that's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen in the future with human population growth in the county, with any other factors that we can or can't control. We don't know those things, but we do know that these things that we proposed, that Andrew presented to you guys today, all these different points that we're working on, that, you know, spearheading throughout Eastern Oregon to try and reverse the mule deer decline, we do feel confident that at least it will slow the decline of mule deer. And we hope that at least in certain places, it can reverse the trend that we're seeing. You know, we don't know that, you know, climate change is a factor, drought is a factor, changing habitat is a factor. You know, there's a lot of factors out there. The diseases are a big factor that are not curable. Several of these diseases are not curable, like Andrew mentioned. So, you know, we do what we can do. We do the best we can do. You folks do the best you can do to try and slow these declines and reverse the trend. And, you know, as a society, that's what we do, you know, if that's our priorities. The reason that we came and met with you today in the information that Andrew presented was because throughout a lot of the Goal 5 overlay update process that we went through with the Planning Commission, there's lots of public testimony. You know, a lot of that we heard that this is the only thing that's happening for mule deer. Is trying to update these Goal 5 overlays in Deschutes County. That certainly is not the case, and hopefully Andrew presented information to you today that represents that. You know, there are spearheads on all sorts of fronts, not only in Oregon, but across the West, to try and reverse the trend in mule deer populations. The Goal 5 overlay process, that was one small part of it, of this overall big, Oregon process and West-wide process that the county is a part of, that the county could affect the change on.
Any words?
Oh, I just have a question. A couple of years ago, when we had like 5 feet of snow that just would never melt, I'm wondering, were the deer here ever fed?
Like artificial feeding?
Right, like throwing out hay bales. That's
not by us. I'm sure, private citizens were, but a lot of times that's does more harm than good on deer that aren't used to whatever you're putting out for them. Their gut biome, their stomachs are so specific on low quality forage in the winter is what their body is expecting and ready for, that when you throw out a bunch of artificial feed, it's something that a lot of times you end up doing more harm than good for them. What is valuable for mule deer in a bad winter like that is intact winter range where there's bitter brush and other shrubs that are healthy enough and tall enough to stick up through that hard crusty snow, where they're able to access that natural forage in the space they're in, and it's available above the snow.
So I really appreciate all the work you're doing on the junipers. Is any of that work being done in Deschutes County?
Yeah, there's there's not an MDI unit in Deschutes County, but with the BLM and the Forest Service and all those, we do leverage funds and coordinate with them on specific, what areas would be impactful for mule deer, for any of their work, including juniper. A lot of the work in Deschutes County with juniper is targeted towards sage grouse out on the desert. For the same reasons, juniper has impacted sage grouse populations.
Right. It's impacting both of them. And
Yep.
I just, I appreciate hearing that. So thank you.
So what about an alpha predator called a wolf out there? I mean, we gotta start wrapping up, but yeah, any thoughts? I didn't see a slide on that. It just seems to be a topic of the day.
It's a topic of the day, and wolves are recolonizing, the East Cascades. You guys are familiar with the two different, known groups of wolves kind of on the northern border and the southern border of Deschutes County. They target deer, but not like mountain lions do, not like cougars do. The number of deer killed in Deschutes County by wolves would not be close to the number of deer killed in Deschutes County by cougars. So that's why I focused on cougars as part of the presentation.
Okay.
So what do you think our county population of cougars is? I was reading some articles where, like a year ago, there were like 22 were seen or something through, more have been seen recently.
More of certain, I don't have a county population estimate for the reasons I kind of outlined in there with how we monitor those populations. But I will say more are seen. There are more cougars now than there were 30 years ago, but also there are a lot more people living along rims of rivers where cougar habitat is. And the third factor I'll mention is like Ring doorbells, the video doorbell security cameras. It's 80% of our sightings that we get reported are based on those roughly. So though that awareness people have now of what's walking in their driveway at 2 a.m., that's where a lot of the sightings come from. And those cougars have been doing that, well before the Ring doorbell was there. So it's a increased awareness by people, and more people out there to be aware is leading to a lot of those increases.
Interesting.
Before we close, I just wanted to express my appreciation for ODF&W for doing this work every day, trying to help us understand how this incredibly important wildlife species is doing in our area, our community, and what we can do to be helping. And I especially wanted to express appreciation for that explanation of the indirect role that habitat and habitat fragmentation has on all of these other sources of mortality. It's really important for people to understand that a malnourished deer is more likely to be caught by a predator, is more likely to not make it across the road before a vehicle hits it, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for emphasizing that. And I hope that clarifies for some of the people who were asking a lot of questions during the debate of the overlay process, why habitat is important.
Thank you, commissioners.
And just acknowledging, what got us here today. So the Planning Commission, reviewed this and, gave us the recommendation. Part of that recommendation was a working group or educational group, best practices group that came to us like that. Goal 5 inventories and a new wildlife overlay. That's kind of a big step. You remember our 50-year land use system, we put our Goal 5 inventories in, 30 years ago or whatever it was. And nobody's done it in the whole state of Oregon since. Nobody's created a new Goal 5 inventory overlay. So it just kept looking bigger and bigger as we started to go through this process. So that's why, the relationship being grounded in what's going to be a valuable effort in our community and putting in perspective. I'm just letting you know that's where I'm at. It got pretty wild. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you for what you do. Happy, healthy wildlife is something we all want to see. Thank you. Well, great. Thank you. Fresh off the press.
Thanks, Andrew.
So thanks for your patience today. We're slipping on the schedule a little bit. These are just proposed times, so at least we have the right people in the room. So item number 12, ARPA updates and funding considerations. So American Rescue Plan dollars. We've been pleased to be able to, write checks to people doing good stuff for the last couple of years, basically. One of the big picture items I always think of is Deschutes County proper was not in a spot where we needed to save ourselves first. And I'm referring to COVID and financial stability and the capacity of the county. So it was nice to be able to just write checks out as we had those dollars available. And at this point, we're kind of circling back to maybe the final allocations or the big picture here. Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Thank you. For the record, Robert Tintle, Chief Financial Officer.
Laura Skundrick, Management Analyst.
So today we are here to hear from staff and a number of community partners on the remaining use of ARPA funds that we have available. And those will include our current funding obligations, new ARPA considerations, and new requests. And actually, Laura has a revised attachment that was included with the memo. We've had a number of last minute requests come in, and so we just wanted to make sure you had the most current information in front of you, and we'll talk through those as well as we go through the presentation. Before we begin, I do want to just provide a little bit of background and history on, as you mentioned, Commissioner Chair DeBonne, on the great work that the county has already done with this. As you know, Deschutes County was awarded $38.4 million from the U.S. Treasury as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. And we received those funds in 2 payments over 2 years at $19 million each. Since that time, the county has allocated approximately $33 million. And those categories range from affordable housing at $7.8 million, broadband about $400,000, a net child care investment allocation of 4.7. I mentioned net, we had allocated some, we had some funds returned to us. Food assistance in the county of 3.6 million. Homelessness efforts, 7.5 million, job training assistance of 200,000, public health and COVID-19 response of 3.9 million, small business and nonprofit assistance, 2.6 million, water infrastructure, 1.9 million, mental health, 50,000, and administration of the program and other costs of 440,000. So a wide range of categories and topics that have been dedicated and allocated thus far. Of that 33 million, we have also a contingency of 2.2 million, which we will talk about today. And so including the contingency, we have about 5 million that still needs to be allocated out of the 38 million we've allocated 33, so that leaves a round number of $5 million, and that's where we are today. So today's requests include projects submitted after the memo was provided, and thus that's why we gave you the updated handout here, and we'll talk about those too. Before the board considers any action on any of the projects, we're going to hear from staff and from community partners. And so we won't ask about board action until we get to the end, until we hear through all the projects, because there are a number of great projects that are on the list today. You will notice that the requests that we have equal about $10 million. And as I mentioned, there are about $5 million remaining that can be allocated from the ARPA funds. So the first projects for the board's consideration are for current obligations. And those are, you'll find these in the attachments that you have that Laura just handed out. And really those current obligations, they're shaded in that grayish blue area. These obligations are projects where the board has made motions on approval of these projects, but the funding had not been formally adopted or identified for these projects as the funding source. And so we were planning on, and we were bringing these back to the board to just finalize the current obligations the board has already made, since all of these projects are ARPA eligible and there aren't additional funds for that. So we will talk through those in just a moment. The next section I just want to highlight is the new ARPA considerations, and those are in some of the yellowish shaded areas. A couple things I want to highlight on that one. First is administration does recommend one of the projects that's included in that is allocating $2 million to provide.
Do other people have a copy of this to follow what we're talking about here? Yes, I don't know if we can put it up, boss. So yeah, I just figured that out. We're looking at real deeply in a piece of paper here.
It was, there have been a couple
request added, but this was part of the meeting.
Okay, so it's part of the
Yeah.
meeting packet and there's
It
slight.
was posted online, right? So if anyone has access as well to their computer, iPhone or phone, it is posted on there, just not the last two projects, which we'll talk.
Okay,
about.
good. So it's
Community
two
reach.
projects added is what it is. Okay, thank
So
you.
thank you for that. So on one of the projects on the new ARPA considerations, it's $2 million for a homeless camp and or supported managed camp, whatever. That still needs to be determined. But administration recommends the board consider allocating $2 million to provide support services to 2 or 3 future managed, supported homeless camps to successfully implement the county's new camping code over the next 2 years. Staff does not currently have a detailed cost estimate for the supported managed camps. Costs will ultimately depend upon the approved scope of services. As you know, we've been having discussions, you all have been having discussions about these managed camps. When we look at the funding sources for that, there aren't general fund resources identified for that. It's not built into the long-term forecast. We do believe those services are eligible for ARPA funds, and with the commitment that we have for providing these, that's why this is a recommendation to use ARPA funds to fund that project as well. Backtracking just a little bit on the current obligations, the $1.625 million that was in, again, the board approved, already made motions to approve those projects. We just had to identify the funding source. Therefore, finance recommends that the board consider allocating 1.625 of the ARPA funds for those current obligations and projects to provide the necessary funding for those projects as well. One item that we previously discussed was that is included in the memo of new ARPA considerations was the $1 million towards county reimbursement for eligible costs that we've already incurred. That was an option that we might want to, the board can consider holding that in abeyance right now, not selecting that project now. We can come back for that prior to December 2024. That project was used as a placeholder in case there are any funds returned between the December 31st, 2024, when all funds have to be obligated, and the December 31st, 2026, when all funds have to be spent. That way we would have a project approved and available to reimburse ourselves for expenditures we've already incurred that were ARPA eligible, so that we could utilize all the funds without having to return to Treasury. However, given we have a large number of requests that we'll be discussing today, we may want to hold off on that as well, and we can reconsider that. The board can reconsider that at a future time.
Well, it's
I mean,
good.
Robert, looking at this front page, it's actually like 5.9 million, and we only have 5.1 million available. So if we do everything on the front page, we can't do anything on the backside.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, you've
So
made
that
it
should help.
more difficult than we can imagine.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's good having that county reimbursement variable. You know, it's plugged in at $1 million, but that could be any number. We have a lot of eligible costs internally. And just like I started off saying, you know, we didn't have to do that. And in a kind of an emergency fashion internally, we were able to write the checks externally.
Yes. So that's a highlight of, again, the first two major sections that, again, had administration recommendations and finance recommendations on the items where the board has already committed or obligated itself to consider using ARPA funds for those. Now, I think we'll walk through department presentations and community partner presentations and updates. Again, we do have a lot, and so I am asking our audience participants try to keep their presentations to 5 minutes. As a reminder, the Board of Commissioners were forwarded all of the proposals as they came through here. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. If not, this reminder in the summary, and then there'll be an opportunity for comments. So first, I will invite Health Services up to talk about their two items. And while they're coming, I will mention the board had previously allocated contingency funds for two areas related to health services. And one was for actually 174, the contingency. Yeah. Oh, yeah, up there at the top. Thank you. Public health response of 624,000 and the other contingency for health unintended consequences of 651,000. So those were part of the contingency, and health services is here to talk about their projects.
We have a PowerPoint as well.
I think we can all squeeze. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, I'm Janice Garceau. I'm Director of Health Services. I'm here with
Emily Horton, Program Manager for Emergency Response and Preparedness and COVID Recovery.
and
Cheryl Smallman, Business Officer for Health Services. Holly Harris may also be.
I think Holly Harris is online. I don't know if people can hear her, but I believe she's online. We have a proposal for remaining ARPA funds that were specifically identified for health unintended consequences and healthcare contingencies. We're proposing to retain 3 of the staff that are currently staffing our emergency preparedness team and allocate a small amount for crisis support for a shift that we've struggled to cover for nearly a year. It's a weekend night shift with a QMHP. The cost of covering those shifts is high when we have to reach out to a temporary staffing agency to get those covered. The 3 FTE that are being converted, sorry?
Oh, the slides aren't.
They're not advancing. Do you want me to do it? I can do it.
Okay.
It's okay. I didn't realize I had the power of the slides.
Sorry.
So those are the amounts and the specific proposals on the screen. I'm going to let Cheryl give you a little bit of detail about the FTE before we move forward, because I think that's important.
Sure, we have 3 limited duration FTE that we're asking to convert regular and then be supported through the ARPA funds. The first is currently a community health or a supervisor position that we would intend to reclassify into a community health specialist 3 position. So that would begin as of July 1, 2024 in that new classification. The second is a management analyst position that is currently working with county administration for a number of projects, project management around homeless encampments and other emergency preparedness projects as well. So that would be continuing that particular FTE. And then the third is an admin support specialist position that currently terms December of this year. Then we request COVID, OHA, continued COVID funding, support that for the second half of this current fiscal year, and then ARPA funds beginning July 1 of 2024.
And if you recall, when we've come before the board before on this particular subject, one of the things that we've been tracking and trying to track numerically for you, because it's been complicated, is that the ramp up of staffing that we relied on to help our community navigate a global pandemic and provide resources to the community, healthcare to the community, safety measures to the community. We've been ramping down for a period of a number of months as those funds have reduced and as the need, frankly, in the community has reduced. And when we brought a proposal to you before, one of the things we talked about is that we continue to see a need to have a core, committed, nimble team of talented, skilled emergency response professionals in public health who are really ready to respond to emergencies. Many of them still related, in fact, to the impact of a pandemic on our community. So an example of that would be some of the information that you've seen regularly coming out of our office related to heat and smoke events and the behind the scenes work that's associated with that information, which is reaching out to members of the community that support vulnerable populations during those kinds of events. So that's just one example. The purpose of those staff is to help us maintain resilient communities. So continue to engage with community partners, provide outreach, educational
education and tools to vulnerable populations on how to protect themselves from health threats. Have an experienced preparedness team in the ready. This includes also coordinating with people like the person that we will ultimately hire to manage our Medical Reserve Corps, for example, and to handle risk communication and logistics supports when emergencies do occur. This year, specifically in relation to COVID response and recovery so far in 2023, and I believe this is a calendar year, not a fiscal year. Okay, so since January of 2023, this team has engaged over 4,000 individuals in the community and participated in 32 community events. 40 people have received wraparound supports. The hotline, which continues to operate, has received 725 phone calls related to COVID and other public health threats or information requests. Over 48,000 individuals have subscribed to and received 7 public health updates about important public health topics and how to protect themselves from emerging and seasonal health threats. And this team has helped provide project planning and coordination with multiple agencies and partners on large-scale incidents affecting our houseless communities. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to talk a little bit about the budget, what the dollars proposed are paying for, and take it from there.
Can you move to the next slide, please?
Oh, sorry.
I won't spend too much time on this, one, because it's probably hard to see on the screen, but two, you also were forwarded it. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have related to it, but it outlines what positions and the additional supplies and what fiscal years we anticipate those supplies will be needed.
So one of the things I'm seeing here, just big picture, is the health response and recovery. We just did the Medical Reserve Corps, and now we're talking about adding, transitioning to 3 new FTE. I'd like it not to be more FTE possibly. I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
It's not new
I'm just,
FTE. These are existing employees who are employed today. They're in limited duration positions. We anticipate that public health modernization funds, which will hopefully come through in the 25-27 biennium and may be greater than what we
bridging to a
received.
different future.
So we are hoping that we are bridging some existing staff doing good work in the community until such time as modernization dollars help us cover that cost.
And it might be a little helpful to have numbers to it. So a couple of years ago, when we were in the midst of COVID, we at one point had about 27 FTE. When we look forward to fiscal year 24, we're looking at a core staffing unit on the emergency team of about 6.
6 including.
And including these 3.
Including these 3, but 3 of which may be paid for with, or are already, some are already established, regular positions paid for with other dollars that are part of emergency response. And then one happens to be Emily, who is the manager of our emergency response and recovery team and is currently paid for through ARPA funds. And we are likely going to be able to transition that role to ongoing modernization dollars in this biennium. So we're really and I know it's complicated, but we are talking about bridging existing staff roles, maintaining them with ARPA dollars to do the work intended by the ARPA dollars until we have modernization dollars available to cover those roles. And as always, when we request regular positions, if those dollars don't come through, we have decisions we have to make about whether or not to maintain those roles. So.
And you were just saying, you were just talking about bridging until public health modernization dollars come for at least Emily's position. How many of these positions do you think would be covered by, of that team of 6?
It really depends on what's awarded by the legislature and appropriated in biennium 25-27. There were big promises made this year. They did not necessarily come through, although we ultimately fared better than we had feared, which is why we can look at covering the manager position through the biennium. And just to not neglect the crisis client support, this is a small portion of the ask. It's really very targeted dollars to help offset the cost or cover the cost of hiring contractors who are extremely expensive to cover shifts when we're not able to recruit staff to cover that shift. It's a weekend night shift. You can imagine. We serve some folks weekend nights at the stabilization center.
Great.
Any questions for health services before we move on to the next project?
So as I'm looking at kind of the ARPA considerations lines, 174,000 for crisis client support, and then the 1 million for response and recovery. Just in the big picture and the requests that are coming down the way, I might like to see that being $500,000 instead of $1 million. So it's kind of working backwards from what your ask is to what looks like it might work in the world of the dynamic allocation process right now. So I just wanted to say those words and we'll see where it all goes. And we don't need to make that decision right now.
Correct. Right. We'll ask for a conversation if the board chair agrees at the end after we hear all the projects.
We'll work through it.
Work through that.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to mention that Nick Lilac, County Administrator, should also be online. So if there comes a point where we need input as well, I believe he should be, I can't see, but I believe he's on there as well. Okay, perfect. So next we'll ask for neighbor impact to come up. This will also include an update from the funding that they've already received and a request for the year 3. As you may recall, there was also a contingency for child care workforce development of $906,000, and this funding was and is out of that contingency. Hey, if you all would like to introduce yourself, and thank you for being here as well.
Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Karen Crow. I'm the Director at Child Care Resources with Neighbor Impact. Denise Hudson, and I'm the project coordinator.
I am Kenzie Kiss. I am a workforce ECE coach with Neighbor Impact. And hello, I'm Kara Davis, and I'm also an ECE coach with Neighbor Impact.
All right, well, we could talk about this project for hours. We will try really hard to keep it to under our 5 minutes. I wanted to start with just gratitude for entrusting us with the funds to get this project off the ground. We've been able to roll out some concepts that we really wanted to test out and have been able to develop additional early care and education workforce with the Fast Track project. So one of the things that we were able to do is to establish a program that provided 60 hours of training. I believe it's exceeded that at this point, to be able to provide a foundation for new teachers coming into the field, working with licensing to allow an exception to get people teacher qualified quickly. Our new hired coaches over here going in and actually connecting that content in the training that's being learned into daily practice with children. And that ongoing coaching has proved to be very, very successful to really build skill with new teachers. Mental health consultation, which is not something that we originally had in our proposal, but we were told up front to get creative and, try new things with this. And so we have mental health consultation for the teachers. And during this time of pandemic recovery, that's proven to be very, very helpful with the adults becoming teachers, but also with supporting behavior in the classroom and really learning the why behind those behaviors and being able to develop really strong skill sets to be able to address them and support the growing children in the classroom. We also have added a component where we're providing coaching to the leaders in the childcare programs. And COVID was a huge hit to leadership staff in early care and education programs. And so really building the skill of what is oftentimes new leadership to be able to do really positive, reflective supervision with these new teachers and have a really consistent skill set amongst the entire team has been really helpful. With our project, when we originally put in our proposal, we had asked for 3 years of funding. and we had 1 year held in reserve. And so we're coming back today to ask for that 3rd year. We are in the middle of our 3rd cohort that is being rolled out in Deschutes County. We have, what are we at now? We're at 40. Kara, you were just giving us these numbers.
We have 43 candidates who have gone through so far.
Okay, so 43 candidates in 3 cohorts. It's becoming more popular as it's becoming more of an established program. And so we anticipate that as we move forward, we will continue to see high usage of the project. We have placement centers who are coming back and asking for additional candidates to be trained because they have additional classrooms to be opened. And we have new centers who are wanting to become part of this project. I think I will stop there and allow time for questions that potentially other staff can also answer.
So you said 43, Karen, 43 people have graduated?
We're in the midst of our 3rd cohort, and so I don't know what the first 2 numbers would, the first 2 cohorts had, but by October, we will have 43 completed.
Okay, so how many could you do though? What's the capacity? Because everyone, seems to be short people applying for things. And I'm just wondering how many, could you have trained another 25?
We have about a room for 11 in each of our cohorts, so 22 per 6 months.
Okay. So you feel like there's more people out there that will actually sign up?
Yes.
How many people are on your waiting list then?
So what we've been doing is getting people into cohorts because we're in the middle of a cohort right now. We have interest out there, but we don't have a wait list so far for the next cohort. People tend to be quickly scooped up. If they don't get into a cohort right away, they move a different direction. And so what we're doing right now is marketing to keep interest coming. We have our pathways director with the other project that we're coming to you for, who's making sure that those people get placed right away into programs. And then we're going back to those people saying, do you want to participate in this? So we're trying to get people placed right away into programs and we don't currently hold a waiting list.
So if someone came to you tomorrow, and could you actually fit them in somewhere then?
What we've been doing is our pathways director will connect them with a program that currently has a position open as a center aide. And then we sort of have them on an informal. Once that cohort starts, then we potentially roll that person directly into that cohort. But we also have other pathways. So it might be connecting that person with COCC classes or connecting them with OSU or another option that's out there so that we get them engaged quickly so they feel like they're moving forward.
Can I ask about long-term sustainability of these programs? So we're talking about year 3 funding right now. I'm really excited and happy to hear about the impact of year 1 and 2 funding that the county was able to provide. How do you, even if we make an allocation today from these contingency funds, how do you continue these services and this important training and mentoring and support? How do you continue these services after year 3?
Well, what we have now is data. And so we're able to show that the project is successful. And we're able to show that we have new teachers going into classrooms who feel like they have a foundation that makes them more prepared to be in the field and less likely to get frustrated and leave because they were not prepared for what was going to happen when they became a teacher. So we've been taking that data, going out, having conversations. One of those conversations is with Heather Ficht with East Cascade Works. We're talking about potential funding for the future for this across all of Central Oregon. So that has been an ongoing conversation from day one because we were pretty confident that this would work and we knew this was temporary funding. So we're talking about that. We're talking to Department of Early Learning and Care about what their projects look like moving forward as they move more into a world of coaching rather than simply training for new staff. And so how do we fit our our current funding model that where we get funding from Department of Early Learning and Care, how do we match that up with our coaching model and our training model to use this proven successful model to do something more sustainable?
Thank you. So looking at our spreadsheet, we have contingency childcare workforce development 906, and this is a request for one of these lines here, childcare workforce development at 530. Is that the two lines we're looking at?
Yeah, there's two lines.
The 142.
142 and 530.
Right.
Okay.
Pathways program
Making
for
sure.
142,000 and fast track teacher training for 530,000.
Okay. Just making sure I understand our own spreadsheet.
So if we already gave you what, $1,060,000 for one program and what, $284,000 for the other. So how much did each teacher cost then that we've trained to date?
If you add in the full cost of the preparation to get the project up and running, if you break that out over all of the teachers, it comes out to about $9,000 per teacher. As we move forward, that overall cost will decrease. So we're spending about $160,000 per cohort. And that includes the stipend that's going to the teacher candidate for attending the additional training, especially in the evenings and on weekends. And that includes the money that's going to the child care center for the additional reflective supervision and leadership staff time.
Is the market catching up at all for a living wage job, or is that still a big disconnect?
It's starting. The needle's moving slowly, but there's a couple things at work in our area that are supporting that increase. One is our publicly funded programs have increased wages. So when you look at places like Mountain Star, Head Start, different programs that have the public funds, those wages are going up, and that naturally pushes up the other teacher wages. The other thing that's happening is a lot of business coaching. And so we have a lot of business coaching going on, support for programs to engage in multiple funding streams outside of the family's contribution. And so encouraging people to look into other funding models is giving people more money and allowing them to reallocate some additional money into wages. So it's slowly happening. I don't see it happening without a large shift where we have additional funding coming from public funds into private childcare.
Yeah, so it's still a big issue though.
Yeah, because if you want to raise teacher pay, which is entirely appropriate in this hiring environment, if there's not public investment in that, then basically that's coming out of parents' pockets, and you've gone from making early learning and childcare an unsustainable career for somebody to making childcare for your kid unaffordable to parents. There's that the math is really problematic.
Yeah, it's a broken business model, and that's why we're in the situation we're in today. Someone always has to subsidize childcare, whether it be on the backs of the teacher, whether it be outside funding. In order to keep it at a reasonable, manageable cost for family, there has to be a subsidy. And it's traditionally been subsidized by teachers taking very low pay, which has kept people out of the field, because who wants to go to college and go into a field where you're going to make less money than you need to support your family. So that's just a place that is a societal issue we have to figure out.
Great, thank you. So we're just getting updates from people as we go down the list here. Correct? I mean, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to see everybody. Thanks for what you're doing.
So the next item, we'll ask to hear from the Mountain View transitional sheltering project that's listed on your spreadsheet for $1.5 million. So we do have representatives from Mountain View Community Development and City of Redmond here as well. So, and online as well. So we do have a number here.
It should be Michelle, I believe, is on.
Yeah, Michelle should be.
Okay.
Michelle's on.
Okay,
Good morning, Chair DeBonne and Commissioner Chang, Commissioner Adair. Michelle is going to give a presentation by Zoom initially.
Great. There's Rick Russell. Hello, everyone. Yes.
Awesome. Commissioner DeBonne, Commissioner Adair, Commissioner Chang, thank you guys so much for having us. We feel very fortunate to be here today and are happy to have the opportunity to present. Mountain View Community Development believes that if we want to see change in our homeless crisis, we must be willing to do courageous things that are beyond what we see as the social norm. We feel that if we're doing what we've always done, we're going to continue to see results we've always had. So our RV park concept was developed after looking at concepts throughout the Northwest aimed at increasing housing supply. And while many organizations are working tirelessly to address the issue, we feel as though the current programs we're seeing are falling short of addressing the root causes of homelessness. At Mountain View, we believe homelessness is caused by a fundamental breakdown of community, and that to begin to enact change, we must commit to becoming the community this population is in need of. To us, this looks like public-private partnerships in which we bring business owners and local leaders together to take ownership of the process. It looks like qualified and experienced service providers providing intensive on-site case management and healthcare services. It looks like local technical programs providing workforce training so that we can support our neighbors as they begin to move away from experiencing homelessness and into becoming contributing members of our workforce. It looks like a sense of ownership and dignity associated with a chance to pay rent for a place to call home, something we believe is a key component to the success of this project. And it looks like 24/7 staff and volunteers living in community with our neighbors so that we can walk alongside them in life as they transition out of homelessness and into being active, involved, contributing members of our community. I know you've had the opportunity to review the project proposal we submitted to the board last week, as well as previously heard our in-person presentations, but I would like to take a few minutes to kind of speak to a few of the specifics of that project. We're currently in design with 10 Over Studio, led by Frank Thaxter, on a 60-unit RV park on the county land known as the East Redmond campus. The site will feature full utility hookups, restroom with shower and laundry facilities, and a community building with meeting and office space for on-site case management. The $3.98 million project cost includes the substantial site work, landscape, infrastructure investment necessary to get our site operational. We've worked tirelessly to identify ongoing operational support for the community and are in the final stages of approval from Pacific Source to finance the bulk of our $1.8 million annual operating budget. We believe the public-private partnerships will be critical to the success of this project and look forward to continuing to work with our local business leaders and elected officials to build not only a physical space to call home, but the community our unhoused neighbors need in order to be successful and thrive as contributing members of our society. I grew up in Redmond. I'm a graduate of Redmond High, and I attended Oregon State, due in no small part to the scholarships I received from our local business owners. I very much feel as though I was raised by this community. After spending the better part of a decade living in a variety of places across the country, it came time to decide where I would raise my own family, and there truly was no other place I could think of. To me, this crisis is personal because I remember with fondness the place where I grew up, and I so badly want the same for my children. With the ever-increasing cost of construction and the lack of affordable housing options available, it's now more critical than ever for our community to provide the support systems necessary to ensure those on the margins of homelessness will not slip through the cracks. While the past 10 years has provided immense growth and change for Central Oregon, with this growth has come a set of challenges I think we're all scrambling to address now. Mountain View believes that the homeless crisis will be solved like rungs on a ladder, with every business and organization and individual giving their best to be part of the solution. We feel our RV park concept is one rung that doesn't currently exist in our area. We see this master planned community as an opportunity not only to provide a transitional step for those leaving short-term shelters, but also for the newly homeless, for the working poor, and for those on a fixed income. We feel this is a place we can catch people early and help them get back on their feet before they descend into chronic homelessness. Commissioners, we are so grateful for your time and for the work you're doing to move our community forward. We too are committed to doing the good hard work of bringing our public and private sectors together so that we can move forward as one united body. I think Mayor Fitch, as well as possibly Keith or Kat Zwicker, may have some comments they want to add. So I want to make sure to save a little time for them, but we're happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
Great, thank you very much.
I will add a few quick comments and then I'll hand it over to the mayor, Kat Zwicker, City Councilor, City of Redmond. Thank you very much, commissioners, for your continued support and partnership with our East Side campus and the current approved lease of 2 weeks ago for our 12 acres. You'll be happy to know that the Oasis Village is on track and we should be expecting our first guest December of 2023 and a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm very happy about that. I do agree with Mountain View that this is an exceptional opportunity to take that tract of land and create not only a transitional space that as we develop it could be used for safe parking, but that rolls into affordable managed RV camping for people that just need a place to start their transition back into permanent housing. It's just an amazing rung on that ladder that they're talking about. And I'll turn it over to Ed.
Thank you. Again, thanks for all of your help over the past year in terms of getting Oasis up on and running. We're happy to have Mountain View with their presentation. It's going to be an excellent project. The initial request for 1.5 million will allow for some site preparation there so that we can actually allow some safe parking while the rest of the funds are being acquired to complete the project. So it'll be put to immediate use. This isn't just going to be sitting in a bank. But this is important because not only the city, but also the county has an obligation to provide spaces for homeless. So to ensure that, number one, we comply with the law. Number two, that we find a safe place for these people to be. And number three, that we ensure the livability of our communities. We're well on track on that with the East Side campus. The city is making a substantial investment in it as well. We've dedicated $750,000 towards the construction of 21st Street to provide safe access, not only to Oasis and the RV facility, but also the 45 acres. We're also working with ODOT and our neighbors to get the dedicated right-of-way and investment into the safe passage from this East Side campus into town, so they're not walking on the highway. So I think together we can make this a reality. We are going to recommend with the county to have an advisory board to coordinate all three of these so they're all compatible, working together in harmony. But we are very optimistic about the future of that East Side campus. And we do hope that you'll be able to fund this because it's going to be a large stepping stone to making that whole East Side campus a reality. Thank you. And again, Michelle and Rick are here as well for any questions you may have.
I have a question for county staff, maybe particularly county legal, which is so, well, let me start by saying I think that this is a very exciting project. I am really appreciative and supportive of all the work that Mountain View Community Development, the City of Redmond have done to address our needs for creating pathways out of homelessness for people, like meaningful pathways out of homelessness for people. As we've seen on this in our staff memo, there is county admin leadership has recommended allocation of $2 million of these ARPA funds for supported managed outdoor shelter. That essentially that the county can claim partnership in, or and take some credit for, as we are looking at removing people from unauthorized locations. So we understand from all the debates about our camping code that we've adopted that we need to help create alternative places for people to go. So we have this $2 million, item on this list, and then we also have this request in front of us for Mountain View community development. And I'm wondering whether there is actually overlap, whether the allocation of funds we make for one of these purposes could be considered an allocation for the other of these purposes as well.
Yeah, I think that could be overlap. I think it's going to be dependent on how staff structures it and decides how to utilize each basically pot of funds, and whether or not the managed camps is going to be for county managed camps, ones that we're under control and ownership over, or if they're going to obviously utilize any of those funds for any type of service providers or privately run projects. I don't know what county staff is proposing at this time as far as the utilization of that $2 million project fund.
And, frankly, I don't picture the county owning and operating anything. I mean, I could picture us contracting services, but I guess, for the purposes of legal compliance with Boise versus Martin, I'm wondering whether active partnership and investment in a project like this could, count this facility on the 10 of the 12 acres as a county project in the eyes of the court.
It could. It would depend more on whether or not there's any type of barriers to the project. That would be what you would look at, as if it's a low barrier shelter.
Okay. Is to Mountain View Community Development, is this currently envisioned as a low barrier shelter?
I'll let Rick and Michelle answer.
Yeah, Commissioner Chang, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this would not qualify as low barrier because this is a for rent model, right? So participants, like a Second Street shelter where you can come in, or a winter shelter like we operate in our church gym, that's low barrier. This is really a rung up the ladder where we're beginning to work people back towards self-sufficiency. So the very fact that someone would be paying rent would disqualify it from being low barrier. However, it opens up capacity for things like safe parking, which are low barrier. So if you've got people kind of coming in from winter shelter to safe parking or Oasis Village, which are low barrier, and then you've got them moving up and out of that into something like a subsidized rent model like this, it opens up more capacity, more bed space at those lower rung levels.
Yeah,
so
very valuable.
Some of my thoughts, Deschutes County proper, this goes right into the goal of doing a land swap for the fairgrounds in the east side of Redmond and the economic development over there. So I'm not landing on a decision here right now, but I mean, that's the goal from my point of view as a Deschutes County representative wanting to do a land swap, which means deterministically getting a spot clear so we can do a land swap. So everybody just needs to understand that that'll be a priority, because we're in the same situation at Juniper Ridge. When we have a code enforcement case, means it's pretty black and white. We have to proceed. So those are the two places that I'm just thinking we need to get some action done, and that'll be part of the decision-making process for myself.
So, Michelle, can you clarify, you're talking about 60 RVs? There will be no small tiny homes or anything like that with your design at this point in time?
What we're looking at is kind of a phased approach. So this initial kind of phase one of the concept would be getting all of the infrastructure work done so that we have full utility hookups to each RV site. And then as we're kind of looking forward toward what is Mountain View's long-term goal or vision for the property, we like this RV park model because it allows us the opportunity to move into some more permanent structures down the road if that is what we feel is kind of the best need for the community at the time. So it leaves the door open for that possibility.
Okay, thank you.
And if I
coming
could
back.
add to that, once you get utilities stubbed into each RV site, it becomes very easy at that point to add a simple stick-built structure to that site at a minimal cost. So the opportunity for eventual phasing is the hard work has been done. This is really a unique opportunity. Also because it's so difficult to find large parcels of land inside the UGB. It really makes this property a very unique property in Deschutes County right now.
But there will be on the 2 acres, the Oasis Village that will be taking gas, as Council Zucker just said, in December. How many small buildings will be there?
The plan for Oasis Village is eventually to have initially 15 by the end of the year, but I think the plan is to have that grow over time to possibly 25 or so, maybe even 30. But that's a evolutionary process, but the initial plan is to have 15 in place.
Okay, thanks.
I also, I have a financial overview handout that Michelle had sent to me this morning. So Michelle, I can hand these out. I don't know if you want to touch on that just at a very high level while I do that.
Yeah, what Laura is handing out was just some supplemental information so that if you wanted to kind of look at where our total project cost budget originated, you can kind of see some of the line items there, a little bit more detail if you have additional questions on that.
Thank you so much. That's the scope of the project at $4 million, huh? Any other questions? So I'm just acknowledging time here. We're slipping way out a proposed schedule for today.
I'm fine.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so
No,
much.
thank you for coming in.
Thank you, commissioners. We'll do a quick overview on some of the remaining projects. I did just want to follow up to Commissioner Chang's question regarding the county's homeless supported camps. Just so you know, part of that, while the details need to be worked out, from my understanding, is the 2 million will cover costs through the eligible period, December 31st, 2026, includes while this project's complementary to the other, but it's not the same. The funds are directed, these funds are more directed to clean water services, restroom facilities. So it's addressing the public safety, public health issues as far as access to clean water and not contaminating, and also some sort of structure around that site. But that's to be determined as well. Although I do think Christy may be in here if there's more questions, or in the room maybe. Oh, yep. Oh, and Eric's here if there are more questions specific to that project. I don't believe there's anyone else in the room that had submitted a project. Is that correct?
No, there's some people here.
Is there someone from which organization?
Tumalo Water District. I know there's someone in the room. Mr. Dempsey's here, or he was here.
Robert Fish is here.
Robert is here.
Want to come up and say hi real quick? Here's your opportunity.
If you'd like an opportunity to speak to your submission.
So this is Tumalo wastewater system conversion seed funding is what it reads it.
Hello, are we on?
Yep.
Okay, my name is Robert Fish. I live in Tumalo. And I'm organizing, continuing these wastewater treatment system that was brought to light through a feasibility study that the county had done recently. At this point, we're just in this opening process of it all, just trying to get the things rolling to the point where we can see if it is even completely feasible with the number of possible services that we have in the area, and with the other restrictions and troubles that we have being down in Tumalo, and then having to get the stuff someplace or take care of it ourselves down there. So we're looking for some seed money. I'm not sure exactly how much we would need, because I'm brand new at all this kind of stuff.
You're asking for 75.
Somebody put in 75.
Okay, 75.
Nobody recommended $75,000.
Okay.
So I'll just acknowledge, this is a community conversation when Deschutes County proper offers resources, and this is the same as Terrebonne, and it's the same thing in Lapine many years ago. It's still a community discussion and a community decision to form a sanitary district. So launching the analysis isn't giving giving authority to say it's here, because that's a community discussion.
Absolutely, yes. We just need to be able to have some funds to talk with engineers, talk with legal, get the process moving in a direction. Because I guess we'll have to pay for the election costs of it all too, once we get to that point. So getting the groundwork established. I have what I call a steering committee put together. We've got 6 people other than myself that will be a quasi board of directors. It's just more steering
Committee at this time, yeah.
Yeah, a committee, just people that are interested in it also. So that way it doesn't sound like I'm making all the decisions, but we've got the community that's involved to direct it and make it do what the community wants.
Great. Thank you.
And I just want to express appreciation to Robert for really stepping up and trying to take the bull by the horns after the feasibility study that the county helped to support was completed. And everyone started looking at each other and saying, well, okay, now what do we do next? Because the first thing we heard back from Chris Doty was, I think the Laidlaw Water District is going to take this on. I've heard, I understand from Robert, who's a board member of the Laidlaw Water District, that he may be the most enthusiastic of the board members there for this cause. So it really will take a lot of community leadership and bringing people together to move to take this potential project the next step. And thank you for being at the center of that.
Well, thank you for helping out.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Chair DeBonne, commissioners, to close out the presentation portion of this, I know we're running over. Laura is going to just provide an overview of the remaining projects where there wasn't a speaker here today, just to summarize and refamiliarize yourself and the public what those projects are for. So I'll turn that over to Laura to give a quick overview of the remaining projects on the community request list.
All right, so just as a reminder, you've received each of these proposals via email, but these will just be high-level summaries. So kind of in a similar lane, the Terrebonne wastewater system is requesting additional funds of $190,000. They originally were awarded $300,000 for the design of sewer system and formation of their sanitary district in Terrebonne. These funds would support bringing that design to be considered shovel-ready, and additional legal, admin, and community outreach items associated with the district and utility system formation. So the next one is from the Shield for veterans counseling. This is also a request for additional funds. They were originally awarded $20,000. They are now requesting $25,000, which would provide 250 hours of discounted specialized counseling for our local veterans. The next one is from Lapine Rural Fire Protection District, requesting $121,472 for the placement of 19 AED units in vehicles and public places in southern Deschutes County, as well as outreach and training for those. And the last one would be the Neighbor Impact Food Warehouse expansion. They're requesting additional funds of $1 million. Their original award was $2.4 million, and this additional request is due to increased costs of construction projects that we know have been increasing recently. And then the last two that have been added to your memo we received within the last day. And so one of those is from Inspire Early Learning Centers. They're requesting $24,400. This would support staffing and also work toward opening 32 additional new childcare slots for children under 3. And then a new childcare center in Sisters is requesting $429,621 to open that new center, which would include parking lot improvements, building, and building costs. And that rounds out all of our community requests.
Commissioners, I know we've given you a lot of information today. You've received, again, a lot of details in the past. So I do want to open the opportunity up. If you would like to take time to think about these projects, we can come back to you at a later date if you'd like to make funding decisions at that time. Otherwise, we are also open and welcome to having that discussion now. And Laura has a spreadsheet if you would like to continue the conversation today.
It's been real valuable kind of diving into each one of these. Yeah, what's the will of the board for taking it to the next step? Any thoughts?
Well, I think there's some that I would say, oh, sure, we could do that right now, but it's such a big package, and then you've got to prioritize what is it on the backside that we're going to actually be able to fund. So I don't know. Do we have time next Wednesday? I mean, actually to do more of an analysis now that we've heard from everyone? Or is that day really busy and we should, select the ones that we know we want to do today?
And I could see just, pulling up the spreadsheet at my desk and playing around with the numbers and see how it works for me. So
Yeah.
I kind of see myself coming back.
I know, I can see, it's just, there's so much information.
Commissioner Adair, it does look like the board would have time next week if that was the will of the board.
Okay, I think that probably would be appropriate.
I'd also put out the possibility of just coming back this afternoon. I mean, we are way off schedule at this point. The way we've allocated time in the agenda development. This is clearly an item that's going to take a substantial amount of time, but I'd be willing to come back after lunch and dig into this. That would give people some time to look at spreadsheets, but also allow us to act in a time responsive manner on these things. I'd also like to say that I think we should make do a formal declaration that ARPA proposal acceptance period is over. That we have closed. We will not accept any more proposals. The most recent one that came in, which is a really good project, came in response to some discussions that I was having with people and sisters about childcare last. Well, we were talking about other things, but childcare came up, and then I explained to people the ARPA allocations we had made to childcare, and also said that one had come back to us, and people said, well, if are those funds available for other childcare projects? And I said, well, to me, there's already plenty of proposals in the pipeline. I don't think we can accept other. I'm not excited about accepting other ones, but we have not formally closed proposal acceptance. So I just gave them enough information that they could make a submission, and we got one in the afternoon yesterday before our deliberations today. So I really think we need to acknowledge that we are oversubscribed in terms of the funds we have available, and shut down acceptance of ARPA proposals formally.
What I support coming to that conclusion, so that'll be part of this. Are you available for reconvening this afternoon? That'd be a good time.
I have a safety meeting for COAC
At what
this
time?
after at 2:30. So I mean, I don't know when we still have a ways to go with our meeting. now.
COAC to drive to Redmond?
No, I'm not exactly sure where I'm sure I'm supposed to be, but it's at
Somewhere.
2:30.
Well, so maybe reconvene at 1:30 and just take it a little farther, see if we can get it landed. It may be valuable.
I mean,
Because we'll be running.
there are a lot of entities. It would be great to give some certainty about whether they're getting funding or not.
How about we go from 1:30 to 2:00? See if we can
You
get it
think we
done.
can get something done then? Yes,
Or 2:15 if it's online for you too or something.
right.
Okay, yeah, so let's do that. I mean, there's no harm in deliberating and talking, see how far we'll take it. So we will reconvene on this matter at 1:30 this afternoon.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Working through our agenda, item number 13, deliberations and request to vacate a portion of Scheibel Road. So There's Cody. Thank you very much for joining us remotely. We had a good hearing on this matter this last week and brought it to this week. Thank you very much for providing all the written testimony. I was able to review the package. And we shall make a decision is what was pointed out to us. So this is obviously some history here, the neighbors, relationships, and access to this specific parcel. So any other thoughts to get started or deliberations? This is us just diving right in.
Right.
Well, Cody, any other new information, anything we should know?
Real quick for the record, board, Cody Smith, County Engineer, Deschutes County Road Department. No, board, I don't have any additional information to add. Obviously, I gave my presentation at last week's during the last week's hearing when the hearing was closed. So the matter is before you now.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Any other?
Can I ask I can ask one question then?
It's kind of on the record.
Okay, all right. Well, I've got it out here.
Okay.
So I'm fine.
Anybody want to lead?
Well, I guess I'd like to reemphasize something that I said during the hearing, which is that I think that there are a whole lot of very important but very individual interests at stake here. If we're being asked in part to determine what the public interest is, I don't really see good ways of determining what is in the public interest in this case, because we have a set of landowners, some who support the proposal, some who oppose the proposal, each for reasons that are very important to them on an individual basis. Basically we're in a position I feel like we've been placed in a position where we have to pick a winner and a loser. And there's a lot of legitimate concerns and interests all around on this issue and claims. I mean, there was a huge amount of history that was given, a lot of he said, she said about how we arrived at this moment, which I'm not really in a position to, we're not in a position to verify many of the claims that were made by both the supporters and the opponents. I would like to ask county legal whether there is actually a way for us, rather than to pick a winner and a loser, or for this to be winner take all. Essentially, whether there are ways that we could structure a decision that is basically kind of give something to more than one of the parties in this issue. The kind of solution that might come out of a mediation if we were allowed to direct the parties to go to mediation, or whether it's basically just we get to decide whether to approve or deny this.
I mean, I think it's whether or not you want to approve or deny the vacation. The nature of the proceedings as outlined in the ORS is it contemplates the fact that clearly you don't have agreement between the parties. That's why we're here. And if we had 100% agreement, clearly there would be no need for a hearing pursuant to the ORS. So I think that you are obligated to make that determination on whether or not to approve it.
So putting direction to this, I will support the road department's direction in vacating this right away in the public interest. So I'm just letting you know that's where I came down. I was reading this yesterday, and I could have gone either way. There's a lot of history here, but the thing that really comes to mind is the history of that meandering right away. As I said, I don't have all that history. It's interesting, but just the logic in me supports having, possible future access, which could be negotiated from the property owners or the access from Old Bedford Highway. So just letting you know, that's where I come down on this.
I know the fact that tax lot 1901 did sign the vacation order seems to, it seemed to be impactful to them, and they did sign the order. So that does make my decision. Yeah, it is definitely, there's two sides to the story, and I'm really sorry that mediation isn't, we have to make a decision. So I would have to go with the road department's assessment also.
So there's quorum of the board on that matter. We can make a motion and vote, or however you want to proceed.
So do I need to make that then?
Yeah, anything else?
I
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Okay. So is there?
Just supporting the vacation.
Okay, I would make the motion for the board to support the vacation of a portion of Scheibel Road.
And second it if you don't. I'll second it. So that's been moved and seconded. As I say, I know this is neighbors. It's close to heart for both parties. We are in that spot. And then we did, thanks for Cody and legal for pointing out that we shall decide. So that was just such an interesting topic here today. So the motion's been made. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. So there we go. A decision's been made by the Board of Commissioners on this matter. Application for vacating portion of Scheibel Road.
Thank you, board. Just real quick, just for the, to kind of outline the remainder of the process, road department will be working with the Gates on securing the right-of-way dedication for that north alignment of Scheibel Road. That was part of our recommendation to the board for a condition of approval here. And once we have that, we will present that to you along with a vacation order for your approval.
Great. Okay. So vacation order approval will be coming.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you, parties. At this time, item number 14, this is deliberations of hearings officer decision on initiation of use involving marijuana production facility. Welcome back, Avery. Oh, it's in the large format in our packet. I think, yeah, we got it. No, we got it. It's, yeah. We still had to print it twice. We're getting there though.
But the really important thing is when I was reading it at home,
Yeah.
I could read it.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, Avery Johnson, assistant planner with community development. As you are aware, we recently conducted a hearing on the initiation of use hearings officer decision. At the conclusion of that hearing, the commissioners asked that we schedule deliberations. And in your packet is the deliberations matrix that outlines the primary issue before the board today, which is whether or not the board should further define what holder of a land use approval means. The matrix includes the hearings officer findings on this issue, the applicant's perspective, and along with staff's recommendation. For the purpose of this singular issue area, staff provides three options for the board's decision. So the first option is to affirm the hearings officer decision, making a finding that it is appropriate to consider those expenditures made prior to land use approval. Option number two is a modification of the hearings officer decision, where the board finds that in this unique situation, where the use is no longer allowed by the code, that it is appropriate to consider those expenditures made prior to land use approval. The third option, again, is staff's recommendation, which we've coordinated with legal counsel with, that the expenditures which should be considered are those that were made from the time the decision became final to the end of its duration of approval. And with that, staff is available for any questions.
Great. Any thoughts or questions?
No.
Kind of a one decision. So this is a declaratory ruling that the applicant had put out. Hearings officer came up with this concept. And yeah, it's in front of us now. I got an answer. Anybody want to lead or I'll? So I support modifying the hearings officer's decision in support of the application, very much extenuating circumstances, knowing that this was an approval. County opted out. It is a marijuana production facility, and this is just a unique instance. And in support of our declaratory rulings and hearings officer decisions for future cases, I do not support, initiated use before a decision. So, I mean, that's exactly the situation we're in here, and that's how the Community Development Department made sure to bring it to us.
I wish there was maybe not as part of this process, but more broadly, I wish there was a way for us to re-emphasize to entities that they should not start their project until they get their land use approvals. This is a unique case. But if we were able to at least, impose a fine or a penalty of some kind, I think I would support the support with modifications the hearings officer's decision, but I would like for there to be a better way for us to signal to everyone in Deschutes County that they should not start their projects until they get their land use approvals.
So what does modifying the hearings officer decision, that's.
So modifying it would be that it's just in essence that the board is finding that this unique present circumstance is the only reason why you guys are affirming this hearings officer decision, rather than just the declaratory ruling in general.
Because another path would have been to reapply for a previous approval, which might have been a kind of the same path as declaratory ruling. It's just since it was opted out, that option wasn't available.
Correct. Yeah. Since marijuana production is no longer available per our code, that's why this is a unique circumstance. And so that would in essence be the modification.
Because it's no longer, will this person, just by doing item number 2, will they be able to go ahead then with their operation?
Correct. They will.
Do you have clarity?
Mhm.
Okay. So, we'll get to a motion, I guess.
Make a motion.
Sure.
So, and we can basically use this as the guide. I'm asking, can I use this as the sort of language for a motion? So I move to modify the hearings officer decision, finding that with this present circumstance, or finding these present circumstances are unique, because the proposed use marijuana production facility is no longer an allowed use. Therefore, in this specific circumstance, considering expenditures made prior to the land use approval is appropriate.
So, okay, that's the motion.
You can second it.
Okay, I will second it. So then for discussion, as I say, the crux of this is it's not appropriate. So that's why at the last moment, I was like, oops, well, does that really say we wanted to? But I mean, it looks like we're going to have support for proceeding with an approval and just, not putting as a future reference point for a future hearings officer, the fact that those, initiated costs are part of the decision. So I
Rather
don't know how
than
it
saying
worded.
appropriate, maybe acceptable. I mean.
Well, in this instance, I guess,
this-
just the qualifier, because that's the whole concept.
In this specific circumstance.
Okay, yeah, that was just discussion. So, Colin, any other discussion? Calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Adair,
No.
and Chair votes yes. So that'll get us to a decision on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 15, second reading of an ordinance of county code relative to camping and other sleeping associated activity on public property.
Hi, Commissioners, Dave Doyle, County Attorney.
One moment.
I didn't hear Commissioner Dare's phone.
No, it was
The
no.
answer is no. Please proceed.
Okay, Dave Doyle, County Council here. This is the time set for if you're electing to proceed, this would be second reading by title only. And then separately adoption of ordinance number 2023-013, which made revisions to the county's existing code section 11.04. As we discussed briefly with the chair in the agenda conference, one thing we want to point out to the board and kind of stress again that for this code to work, we have to have some alternate shelter sites to direct people to. And I think in light of the populations we have on the DSL land, on the Juniper Ridge Dirt World property, and potentially if there's any extension for China Hat and the federal properties, the 2 and 3 acre parcels that have been addressed and spoken about of late probably aren't going to suffice for that. So if the board wants more time potentially to find larger sites that could work as alternate shelter locations, then you could refrain from the second reading at this point and in essence, keep this in sort of a holding pattern. I will note if you do second reading by title only today, the adoption would occur 90 days later. In that point in time, there'd be no action taken on that new provision of county code. However, there is a risk that if you do second reading with the adoption 90 days later, that if someone wanted to challenge the code on its face without it actually being applied, there could be potential legal challenges as soon as that. So it's a thought to keep in mind if you don't already have some sites identified where you were going to be able to direct people to in order to enforce this camping code. So a little complex, a little bit of a twist, but again, I want to, we stress from the beginning and can't stress it enough. We have to have some other locations for this to really work and we believe be consistent with the Martin versus Boise and the Johnson versus Grants Pass decisions of the Ninth Circuit. So if the board's comfortable that within 90 days, they're going to have some sites available where populations of that size, including the Dirt World, the DSL land area, and potentially even the China Hat area. If you think in that 90 days, we're going to be able to locate and get those sites up and prepared to take those populations, then you might want to continue with second reading and move on. If you're concerned that might not occur, or if the direction of the CHRO or anyone else seems to be more scattered, smaller sites, then this might not be ready to proceed. So I just want you to be aware of that.
So that's, in light of
the landscape seems to be changing quite a bit since the sheriff was here 2-3 months ago, bringing this issue up. And so whether that affects whether you folks want to move forward at this point or put this on the shelf for a little while to see what develops in terms of alternate shelter locations, that's your decision to make.
on the results of what the outreach to governor directly, and the response was, not on resource land outside of a city. So I mean, the one part's got more clear, but it sure stopped us from having action available too.
But I do have a letter from Counselor Anthony Rodman, who I talked to on Saturday. And he really feels, to quote the letter, House Bill 2006 expanded the concept to include any public or private entity, not just churches, and adjusted the limits under which overnight vehicle camping could be allowed, but did not add a requirement that this overnight camping can occur only within the UGBs. Anyway, I know you're on a different position than that, but
I think everyone in the state's on a different position.
I know, but he's citing it and what we have to provide. So we'll.
I know DLCD would not agree with his assessment of that. They've told us as much. I don't believe the governor agrees with that. Your county legal department doesn't believe that's the appropriate interpretation of that provision. If it was, we'd sure as heck tell you. If we felt that authorized the county to go ahead and develop a bunch of alternate sites out on
we have
PFU lands, we'd be the
We have
first to
people
tell you
on
that.
50 acres right now that they shouldn't be on too, that we haven't moved them off of. So, there's two sides to this story.
Sure, but
I
there's
just
one.
feel like the 9 acres between two churches is, a better site than where they are now, the 50 acres. And we haven't moved them.
Any thoughts, Commissioner?
On that or on?
Well, yeah, we're here for a second reading as scheduled. And now the guidance is that, we're still going down a path that's unclear. And this may not be implementable, I guess, is the problem. Yeah.
I'm comfortable either way.
Um,
If we move forward with this, it creates urgency for the county to get real serious and focused and make these alternative sites happen. If we're anxious that we won't be able to make that, get that lined up in 90 days, then we can wait.
We actually are supposed to hear back from the state today. They are doing an analysis of their property. So Matthew Garrett told me he would let me know today.
They're not going to find anything in Bend.
Well, you never know. Maybe they'll find something in Lapine, right, Commissioner Devon? You just.
So then the question is, do we have support for a second reading for this Deschutes County code at this point in time with the new information and how the landscape is evolving? So if we do a second reading and then adoption, 90 days is the window for when it's.
Yeah, 90 days out would be when you could first start to enforce it. And again, you wouldn't be compelled to enforce it, but you'd have the ability starting the tail end of November to enforce that. And again, that's assuming you have some place to direct people to. If you don't have that, then staff would certainly recommend you not take any actions towards enforcing it. The one caveat I do put in is if you do second reading and adoption today, adoption meaning down the road in 90 days, there's a risk. I think it's a limited risk, but there's a risk that it could be challenged on its face at that point in time, even before the 90 days runs.
Well,
now I will point out that the Johnson case and the Martin case were not facial challenges to those actions. Those were as applied on the ground type challenges. So that's would lead us to believe if this was going to be challenged, that's the point in time when it would occur. But we'd be remiss if we didn't at least alert you to there is the possibility on a constitutional basis, someone could challenge it on the face.
I'll make the motion. Move second reading by title only and adoption of ordinance number 2023-013, providing amendments to Deschutes County Code section 11.04.
I would just clarify, I would do two separate motions if you're second reading by title only and then do a second one for adoption.
Okay. So I make the motion second reading by title only. Amending the code.
And it's been seconded.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And chair votes yes also. So there answers that question. We're proceeding today. So this is second reading of ordinance number 2023-013 by title only and ordinance amending title 11.04 public use of the Deschutes County Code. So a motion for adoption, and that'll be not by emergency, so it'll be 90 days from now.
I move adoption of ordinance number 2023-013.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. Okay, well, thank you for putting that package together. We've had quite a process to get to this point, and obviously yeah, it's not done yet. Whatever it is, it's not done yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as I say, item I guess trying to make sure I mention it correctly. So the ARPA funding update, item number 12, will reconvene at 1:30 today for funding decisions and discussion. Is there anything else we want to fit in before lunch? Whitney, you're doing a great job there today.
Just to check, 1:30 or 12:30?
1:30 was the idea, to have a full lunch and be able to do it. Yep.
That's great. No, I think just a few items to coordinate with the board on. Health Services does have some additional information if the board were interested in hearing it related to the potential reduced amount for their requests and how that might align with what they're proposing. So if it's of interest to the board, we can have Health Services staff come back this afternoon, and if the board has the information we need, that's fine. as
Yeah.
well.
So yeah, I would support of having here, as I say, it was just one of those things that could be a variable. That's all I was proposing.
Great. And then I'm assuming you'd like to keep executive session scheduled after.
Well, so is your meeting online or?
It's Zoom, but I have to
Okay.
get upstairs and turn on my,
Okay.
yes, I have to be there.
Should we do the executive session now or?
Yeah, well, let's do that now. So then we're a little bit more.
Okay, I'm going to the restroom.
Yeah, let's take a little break. We'll have executive session, then take lunch. So executive session will be 1926602D labor in a few moments. Yeah, let's stand up.